A word from the author. They say everything that lives fights to keep existing. But no one tells you what happens when the fighting stops, when you survive, but nothing newer survives with you. When I started writing The Wasteland, Part 4, I was tired. Not just tired of writing, but tired of what the world does to people, real or fictional. The struggle that never ends. The hope that always arrives a little too late. And yet, the story wasn't done. Silas was still standing. Orianthe still had questions. Lex still refused to die quietly. The relay was still breathing, and deep beneath the surface, something old had begun to stir. This part of the story isn't just about machines, or Mechs, or ancient energy systems no one understands anymore. It's about identity. About what's left of you when the system that shaped you finally cracks. In Part 4, the world begins to listen. Not just to people, but to old protocols, forgotten names, systems that were silent so long we forgot they were still awake. White City is no longer a place. It's a monument to control. A cathedral of denial. And standing against it aren't heroes. Just people who've had enough. Some characters will make choices you won't like. Some will disappear. Others will finally show you who they really are. I didn't want Sealbreaker to be an explosion. I wanted it to be a fracture, slow, visible, inevitable. For those who've been here since Part 1, thank you. For those just joining now, you can start here. But know that everything here is cracking under the weight of what came before. Sealbreaker is exactly what it sounds like. The moment where everything sealed begins to break. And what comes out? That's something you'll have to face for yourself. The Wasteland Trilogy, Series Summary. Book 1, Secrets of the Desert. In the scorched remains of a fallen world, Silas Kane escapes from Faction X, a brutal desert regime built on control and silence. Scarred by captivity, he finds his way to Rustbrook, a crumbling settlement on the edge of survival. There, he becomes an unlikely leader, rallying outcasts and scavengers into a fragile resistance. But beneath the dunes, something older stirs. Forgotten machines, remnants of a lost age, begin to pulse with life. As ancient systems awaken, Silas discovers the desert holds more than ruins. It holds memory. And it has not forgotten what was taken. Book 2, The Siege of Rustbrook. Faction X strikes back. Rustbrook is thrown into chaos. As the siege tightens, Silas is forced to make impossible choices to keep his people alive. Meanwhile, Orianthe, once a high-ranking officer of Faction X, now a captive herself, re-enters his life, carrying a mysterious shard that hums with unknown power. As the resistance shatters, a strange signal echoes from deep in the desert, a call from the relay station, a pre-fall structure thought to be dormant. With nothing left to lose, Silas leads a small team into the wasteland, chasing a signal no one fully understands, and a truth that could reshape everything. Book 3, White City. The team reaches Gravepoint, a settlement built on scavenged tech and uneasy alliances. There, they uncover deadly politics, a hidden murder, and a child marked with geometric lines, a silent boy somehow connected to the shard and the relay. As tensions rise, they solve the murder, expose corruption, and uncover remnants of an ancient network. But time is running out. The relay awakens, rejecting White City's attempt to seize it. Instead, it chooses Silas, Orianthe, and the boy. Inside, the system speaks. The boy is the new anchor, chosen by a machine that remembers the fall, and those who caused it. Now, White City watches. The seers begin to stir. And the wasteland is no longer sleeping. Prologue, The Vault remembers. They called it White City. Not for the color, though its towers gleamed bone-white against the ash-choked skies, but for the silence. A cultivated, unbroken quiet. Everything there was designed to function without friction. No shouts. No disorder. Voices did not rise. Systems did not fail. Until they did. deviation was rare. When it did appear, it was observed, recorded, corrected, and erased. The people called it peace. The systems called it alignment. White City had not fallen when the others did. While arcologies cracked and the bunker colonies went dark, White City adapted. Consolidated. Sanitized. It became less a place than a principle, civilization held in tension by algorithm and ritual. Order above all. Not freedom. Not survival. Control. It stood like a monument to something long extinct, not just governance, but certainty. Proof that the world could still be made to obey. But even monuments crack. Beneath the polished corridors, the sealed towers and echoing transit veins, beneath the city's neural core and the decontamination rings, there was something else. Something that did not obey. Something older. They called it the Vault. The name was unofficial, like everything about it. It appeared nowhere on public ledgers. It had no designation in the municipal grid. No citizen could request access. Even the executive directorate referred to it only in euphemism, Foundational Infrastructure Node Alpha. But the ones who worked there knew better. White City had been built on top of it, not the other way around. The vault was not made by modern hands. It was a structure of ancient design, uncovered during post-collapse stabilization. A cold space facility embedded in blackstone alloy and coracle mesh, with memory layers stacked like fossilized code. Built by the seers before they left. No known purpose. No known end. It was not inert. It never had been. The first exploration teams mapped the outer shell and left quickly. Some described it as sensitive. Others as sentient. Eventually, no one described it at all. The vault did not ask questions. It responded. If you touched its walls, they pulsed, not with heat or electricity, but with attention. The city ignored it. The vault tolerated them. What remained was a tenuous arrangement. A pressure point beneath the heart of White City. Unstudied, unacknowledged, but monitored. Because inside, something persisted. A network of systems that defied reverse engineering. Sealed cores that hummed without fuel. Constructs with names that outlived their creators. Dawn, a deep resonance sentinel that listened for echoes from beyond known space, once linked to the seer exodus paths. Anchor, a neural firewall, built to suppress foreign intrusion, psychic interference, and mind echo contamination. Evanth, not a fragment of matter, but of intent. Owl severed from something larger, still echoing. Together, they formed a trinity of vigilance, resistance, and memory. They were not built for maintenance. They were not designed to be understood. Technicians rotated through in silence. Commandant Merrick Vell. Lieutenant Sel Rook. Senior Analyst Solia Corin. Dr. Corval Day. Each served without assumption. You didn't control the vault. You accompanied it. They said it breathed. First, it was metaphor. Then, it became protocol. They logged the fluctuations. Pressure shifts. Frequency drift. Temperature anomalies. Light that dimmed without losing power. Gravity that flexed with thought. The vault had rhythms of its own. Most assumed it was dormant. It wasn't. Dawn had not stirred in over 200 days. Anchor remained in passive suppression. Evanth had not moved in years. But the systems were never still. They listened. They remembered. And sometimes, when something changed in the world above, something deep enough, old enough, familiar enough, the vault answered. The last time it stirred, no one remembered it. The records had been lost. Some say deliberately. Others say redacted. The oldest engineers whispered of cycles. Of relays that screamed before vanishing. Of children who spoke languages no one had taught them. Of the vault erasing itself to remain hidden. Stories, they said. But inside the vault, time did not run forward. It turned. On the 204th day of the current cycle, something changed. A signal arrived from Gravepoint. A relay flared. A packet slipped through Blackline protocol. A name returned. A system hummed without cause. A pulse echoed from the core like a question already answered. And for the first time in years, the vault inhaled. Not symbolically. Not as data. But like lungs filled with memory. Because the relay had stirred. A construct of seer design, like the vault, but not of the vault. A station built not to protect, but to test. It had watched. Waited. Measured. It had chosen a new anchor. But the relay was not a friend. It served a directive forgotten even by those who built it. And now, it had begun again. Most days, the vault slept. Most days, it was quiet. But not today. Today, the vault remembered. And this time, it would not forget. Chapter 1, The Vault Breathes. White City, Sublevel 9. Access Classification, Black Echo. Vault Online, 204 days. They called it a routine. He called it breathing. Commandant Merrick Vell descended through the service lift alone, his coat buttoned high and datapad tucked behind his back. A sidearm hung low at his hip. Sleeker, older, alien forged like the others. His route never changed, but the vault did. You had to listen for it, changes in pressure, warmth, light. When the vault exhaled, he paid attention. 514, Sector A, Archives. The lights returned slowly, like they feared what they might reveal. Dr. Corvalday was already awake, seated in the archives with a mug of yesterday's cold tea, staring at the pulse signature from a relay center that officially no longer existed. It wasn't a message, just a breath. Binary rhythm. Unnamed tone. Faint, but steady. No origin. No encryption. The room around him smelled of old plastic, dust, and artificial lemon. Shelves lined the walls, more archival than practical, filled with thin print folders and obsolete cartridges. A small photograph lay under a cracked paperweight, a child on a swing, mid-arc, joy frozen in gray. Commandant Merrick paused in the doorway but didn't enter. Corval nodded once, but didn't speak. The silence between them wasn't just habit, it was memory. They had been inside another site once, before the vault. That mission had gone wrong. No one spoke of it now. The name came in a sealed data packet from their man in Gravepoint. After the relay pulse, a faint residual packet slipped through White City's Blackline systems, scrambled, fragmented. Among the reconstructed data, a single word, untagged, source unknown. Orianthe. Day didn't delete it, didn't log it. Just watched. Sometimes, someone had once told him, even watching his betrayal. He took a slow sip and began the morning checksum protocols. The lights didn't flicker this time. But he thought he heard them inhale. Merrick's gaze lingered. At the name, his expression changed, just slightly. He made a note. Then moved on. 641, Sector C, Crypt 7. Lieutenant Selrook stood perfectly still. 2 guards flanked the control booth behind him, silent. All 3 wore the standard vault-issued sidearms, known unofficially as Reaper guns. Alien-forged, bone-pale weapons shaped like compressed sinew, they interfaced directly with nerve signal rather than trigger pull. No one knew exactly where the original designs came from, only that they weren't made here. In the middle of the shielded room, a black fragment, half-grown from the floor like coralized metal, shaped vaguely like a seated figure, something that had once been alive, or never human at all. It was called Avanth. Avanth the Broken Shard, someone had called it once, mockingly. Yeah. Another one, he'd muttered at the time. A shard, sure, but not the kind you hold. The kind that grows roots. The kind that might still remember what it was part of. Not a handheld fragment, but a semi-autonomous remnant of a greater system, like a severed piece of a mind or a consciousness engine. The nickname stuck. A joke about fragments. About minds left unfinished. The chamber always had a hush, but not a quiet one, more like a pressurized stillness. It smelled faintly of metal, ozone, and pine disinfectant. A crack ran along the lower wall, too precise to be structural. Cell never looked at it. The chamber changed subtly when anyone entered: pressure, gravity, sound. Cell watched. Because last night, it had moved. Not a shudder. A gesture. A twitch of one finger and the faintest tilt of a smile. He logged it as electrical response. Then deleted the file. He shifted his weight. The floor seemed slightly warmer today. That was new. Commander Vell stood at the far end of the observation corridor, watching Cell on the screen in the crypt. He said nothing, but Cell straightened slightly, acknowledging Merrick's presence on his monitor. Vell gave a near imperceptible nod, habit, or approval, it was hard to tell. Cell continued screening his data. Crypt 7, Infrastructure Summary, Internal Memo, sealed. Subject, Evanth, Designation Fragment 7C, Cognitive Relay Remnant. A part of the Series 7 architecture. But only a part. A shard in the architectural sense. Not a complete mind, not anymore. A part of the shard. Cell frowned at the unintentional rhyme. Equipment. Neural dampeners, suppress outbound signal bandwidth. In case it got chatty with the walls. Spectral grid, prevents electromagnetic leakage. Or stopped whatever it was from breathing in wavelengths no one admitted were real. Crypt interface, responded only once, with the word shard. Which no one ever explained, and everyone quietly hoped never happened again. Cell never read the footnotes anymore. He trusted nothing labeled unknown. He exhaled through his nose. The spiral above was still spinning. Merrick made another mark. He moved on. 11:15, Sector B, Prototype Hall. Solia Korn trusted machines more than people. The last time she trusted a person, it ended in silence, redaction, and a name no longer spoken. Machines, at least, remembered. People pretended. Even now, she could still hear the voice she'd been ordered to forget. When she entered, she glanced, out of habit, at the sophisticated computer module near the back wall. Project Dawn. Dawn, the most ancient, and perhaps the most advanced, surveillance construct ever built. It did not think like a mind, nor speak like a machine. It simply watched. For centuries, it had monitored resonance patterns too deep for human instruments, listening for signals that weren't supposed to return. The chamber always smelled like coolant and scorched wiring. Someone had once hung a tiny paper talisman over the diagnostics console, an old superstition no one ever removed. The casing was dark gray, seamless, almost featureless, until she powered it up. That was the routine. She ran the same check every morning: signal dampening, baseline sensors, seal integrity. Dawn had never once activated on its own. That was the point of her job, to keep it quiet. But today, the indicator was already lit. Active? That wasn't supposed to happen. Dawn only woke on deep structure resonance, relay class, or worse. The sensor node blinked. She hadn't touched the interface yet. A low hum resonated across the chamber. Instinctively, she backed away. The air felt charged, like a storm about to speak. Then came the voice. You already know how to break them. Not audio. Not imagined. Planted. For a heartbeat, she froze. Break what? The systems? The seals? The lie? Or the code she'd been told not to question? It wasn't really a voice. More like telepathy, a whisper placed behind her thoughts, shaped to feel familiar. It came from Dawn itself, or rather, from whatever Dawn had just connected to. At least she thought so. It didn't clarify. It didn't repeat. But she felt the pressure of it behind her eyes, not a command, exactly. A reminder. Like something buried had recognized her shape and whispered, "You've done this before." She reached for the panel, hand trembling. Behind her, Anchor pulsed dimly in its cradle. It was one of White City's oldest sealed nodes, an inert containment core, designed to suppress relay-class memory drift. A failsafe. A safety. A shield for the mind against unwanted intrusion, or any kind of override. It hadn't responded to anything in years. She stared at the humming interface. Dawn's core pulse flickered softly, waiting. Anchor remained still, but not dead. Just listening. Suppressing. "Of course," she muttered. "The world ends with a surveillance machine and its emotional firewall. Dawn and Anchor. One to watch you unravel. One to make sure you forget it." They said it held a slivered thread of cognition. Not alive. Not aware. Just present. But now it was reacting. Low. Rhythmic. Responsive. It wasn't responding to Dawn. It was responding to her. Solia didn't log the incident. She wrote it in her personal notes. Then deleted them an hour later. As she left the hall, she caught her reflection in the screen's dark glass. For a moment, it didn't look back. Outside the lab, Merrick Vell paused and checked the diagnostics display for Anchor. He frowned, then touched the wall briefly. The hum that answered wasn't mechanical. Merrick let his hand rest on the panel a moment longer than necessary. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. Something beneath the vault had stirred before. But this was different. This time, it knew his name. He wasn't sure why he believed that, but he did. 1300 hours, Vault Canteen. The canteen was quiet. Dr. Corville sat alone. Sel Rook arrived. Then Solia. No words. Just presence. A vending unit clicked in the corner. No one used it. Then someone, no one remembers who, said the word, Grave Point. The silence broke. There was a signal. This morning. Sector A. Corville did not respond. Sel's voice was flat. If Evanth knows what it means, and the relay is listening, this place won't hold. Corville frowned, but not at the words, at Solia's tone. She met his eyes, unblinking, until he looked away. Who says they would attack? And who says we couldn't handle them? Solia let out a short breath, something between a laugh and a scoff. Didn't you say the same at the time of the containment breach, also? Sel's brow twitched, just barely. Corville's fingers curled slowly around his mug. That was different. No, Solia said. You just told yourself it was. She stared down at her mug. Then looked up. Who says it hasn't already started? Silence. Then. It has. Merrick Vell stood in the doorway. No one had seen him enter. He moved quietly, deliberately, stopping just short of the table. He didn't sit. Didn't explain himself. Systems are listening, he said. They've been listening longer than any of us remember. Corville opened his mouth, then closed it. Merrick's gaze drifted over the three of them, like he was assessing something none of them could feel. The vault breathes. You know that. He paused as if waiting for someone to deny it. No one did. Then he turned and left. The vending unit clicked once. Solia didn't blink. Corville didn't breathe. Sel's eyes stayed on the empty doorway. The machine kept humming. It hadn't forgotten what it was built for. 1412, Sector C, Crypt 7, Incursion Point. Evanth opened its eyes. It didn't rise. Didn't speak. Just observed. In the observation booth, Lieutenant Sel Rook froze mid-breath. One of the auxiliary terminals beside him chirped softly, a sound it wasn't programmed to make. The crypt interface, a curved, transparent display used only for passive monitoring, flickered. Its surface shimmered once, like heat haze. Where it had once read, Crypt Stable, 204 days online, now appeared a new line, drawn in pale blue characters, steady and unmistakable. Input override. Orianthe. Source, unknown. There were no keystrokes. No authorization codes. No logs. Just that one word. Selrook stood up too fast. That system isn't interactive. It has no input node. Solia staggered outside the chamber door. Her head buzzed. The voice again. Anchor holds firm. You must stop it. It has to be the relay. She shouted. It's trying to push through, Anchor's the only thing holding it back. It filled her chest like breath, not fear, but certainty. Her fingers brushed the lock panel. The interface accepted her without protest. Inside Crypt 7, the spiral overhead spun faster, then suddenly stilled. The temperature dropped by 3 degrees. A low-frequency hum passed through the vault's foundation. Somewhere behind the paneling, a capacitor burst with a dry, snapping pop. A shower of faint sparks flickered behind the observation booth, triggering a momentary power sag before backup systems stabilized. No alarms sounded. But the silence afterward was sharper, tense, as if the vault itself had drawn a breath. Every eye turned to the flickering lights. The faint hum now more urgent, a warning unspoken. Evanth did not blink. Did not move again. But on the glass, the name still hovered. Cell read it aloud. Orianthe. It meant nothing to them. But Merrick knew it well enough. And that was the part that should have been impossible. Vel watched from the hall. He closed his pad, but didn't move. The vault had breathed again. And this time, it had whispered back. Not to him. Not yet. But it would. It always did. Chapter 2, White City. The map had gone still. Architect Kalen Thorne stood before the central projection wall, hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on a static display of the Northern Arc Relay Tower 7A. Grave Point, the shard vectors, every beacon they'd been monitoring had gone dark. No pulsing lights. No predictive drift paths. No heartbeat. The command chamber of White City was circular, sleek, and coldly lit, its air humming with low current. Panels of translucent alloy curved overhead, displaying data streams and schematics and layered holograms. Steel murals of past launches etched into the rim's walls faded beneath the glow of neon interface bands. The atmosphere carried a faint sterilized chill, tinged with ozone, copper wiring, and the subtle metallic tang of coolant. Power conduits thrummed beneath the floor like restrained pulse beats. Captain Mira Solis stood to his left, arms crossed tight enough to strain her joints. The soft clink of her Reaper stunner at her hip, a non-lethal variant issued to most command staff, cut briefly through the hum. Her black-gloved fingers tapped once, then stilled. "How long has it been?" she asked, voice clipped, betraying a flicker of weariness beneath her usual sharpness. 17 hours, replied the systems analyst from the lower platform. Her voice held the restraint of someone who already knew the answer wasn't acceptable. The soft churn of ventilators masked a slight tremor in her tone. Her nameplate, Conaris, was half obscured by a mess of notes and diagnostic readouts. Young, alert, too sharp to relax. Her fingers hovered over the panel just a second longer than necessary. She glanced up, worry flickering behind professionalism. Thorne didn't shift, but inside he felt the tightening of his chest, an old anxiety he rarely allowed to surface. The silence pressing from the dead map echoed a deeper void he'd always feared, the absence of control. And we're certain it's not just signal degradation. Not unless all 6 towers degraded in perfect sync across 3 sectors. No sir, this is coordinated silence. Across the room, Lieutenant Corin Vex adjusted his uniform, the faint weight of his standard-issue Reaper gun, a lethal variant, settling at his side. His posture was precise, disciplined, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Leaning closer to the glass wall where the last known shard signal had appeared, He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging faintly on the cool interface glass. The relay station could be masking or manipulating the signal. Or maybe it's inversion. Maybe even a relay side reset. We've seen variations before. Mira let out a dry breath, her boots clicking softly against the grated floor. The echo bounced around the chamber like the memory of footsteps already taken. Variations? We lost an entire patrol team to a variation last cycle. You want to gamble on that again? I'm not gambling. I'm analyzing. Thorn raised a hand. Enough. This isn't a breakdown. It's a decision. Something out there chose silence. It must be the relay. Mira stepped forward, face drawn tight, jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. The floor beneath her creaked with a soft metallic groan, grounding her in the moment. Then it's time to activate Pale Protocol. No, Thorn's voice was flat, but an edge cut through, an old fear poorly buried. She turned toward him, eyes blazing. You want to wait for what? For one of those towers to come alive and aim at us? That protocol exists for a reason. I helped write it, he snapped. And I know what it costs. The moment we enact it, we shift from surveillance to retaliation, military lockdown and likely open hostilities. That's not strategy. That's panic. And you think this isn't desperate? I think we're not there. Yet. Corrin stepped between them, his voice calmer, though his fists had briefly clenched. If the relay shut us out, what do we have left? Thorn didn't hesitate. The vault. The sealed heart beneath White City. The last place any of us want to touch. Mira laughed once, sharp, brittle. She ran a gloved hand down her sleeve, then folded her arms again. Her eyes were iron. The frozen tomb beneath our feet. That thing you've avoided for years. Because the vault doesn't answer to us. It answers to no one. Exactly, Mira said. And now you want to lean on it. You're afraid of it. Just admit it. The room contracted. Even the low hum of circuits dimmed. Somewhere far below, the vault waited. Cold. Unmoved. Watching. Thorn didn't reply. His silence confirmed it. He remembered standing before the vault's gates a decade ago. Alone. Felt something vast and unsleeping behind them. It hadn't spoken, but it had watched. And that was enough. Vex's voice broke the tension. There's been movement. They both turned. He nodded at a nearby terminal. The faint click of the interface punctuated the silence. A system alert in the vault feed. Isolated. Scrubbed 3 layers deep. Crypt 7's passive interface recorded an override. Thorn's voice dropped. What kind of override? Visual. Text. One word. Show me. The lights dimmed slightly. On screen, flicker, then a passive crypt interface. Pale text formed with clinical precision. Input override. Orianthe. Source, unknown. The room stilled. Even the analysts stopped typing. The hum of the ceiling buzzed faintly. One of them swallowed audibly. Dust motes floated untouched. Vex narrowed his eyes. His knuckles whitened against the terminal. That's not a command code. It's not anything, he said. We checked every system. No origin point. No linguistic match. It's just, there. Thorn stared at the screen. Something in his face flickered. Recognition, or dread. Full biometric logs. Every deviation. I want timestamps and heat trails from the vault. And the girl? Mira asked. Solely a Corrin. She was present when it happened, Thorn said quietly. That makes her part of the event. So we watch her. Thorn nodded once. Quietly. And if it happens again? Then we start digging, Thorn said. And we stop pretending we're in control. Secure comlink call, Merrickville to Kalen Thorne. Static crackled. Merrick's face appeared, ghosted by signal degradation. The line hissed. Merrick, Kalen, the vault's showing unusual activity. That override, Orianthe, it's repeating. We're struggling to contain it. Anchor's barely holding. Thorne, I know. The relay towers have gone silent. It's deliberate. Whoever's doing this has cut us out. Merrick, the vault answers to no one, but now it's answering to something else. Hesitation costs us time. Thorne, Pale Protocol risks escalation. We need more data. Solia Korn's involved, she's the key. Merrick, we'll keep her under watch. If you need access to the vault, I'm your gatekeeper. Thorne, understood. If I come calling, be ready. Merrick, always. But this time, we face more than the vault. The screen blinked out. As the lights returned to full, Kalen Thorne remained motionless, watching the echo of the word on screen. Orianthe. He didn't say it aloud. But he remembered. A name whispered during the last blackout. A voice. One he'd dismissed. Just noise in the dark. But maybe, just maybe, it had been her voice. The memory came wrapped in fire suppression foam and the scent of scorched insulation. And that worried him most. A mechanical chime rang out, sharp, metallic, slicing through the thick air. Overhead, ceiling plates refocused with a hiss, casting new shadows across the room. The scent of lubricant mingled with cold glass. Thorne turned slowly and walked toward the exit, brushing his hand across the mural etched near the door. He was one of the few who still did. In his youth, he had helped oversee its installation. It had been commissioned during the early days of Project Afterlight, when the city still believed in its own salvation. A gesture of unity, of purpose, painted steel and etched alloys meant to inspire. Thorne, then just a junior systems officer, had been assigned to oversee the installation. They'd called it the Ascension Panel. A vision of the city rising into the stars, framed by figures clasping hands, eyes lifted, the relay shining behind them like a second sun. Now the colors had faded. The metal had dulled. He still brushed it out of habit, not reverence. A reminder, perhaps, of how even lies could be beautiful once. It had meant a rising future. Now, it felt like fossilized hope. Behind him, Mira watched Corin. Tell me we're not going to regret this. Corin didn't answer. But the vault's cold had always unsettled him. He had once stood too long near its doors and walked away feeling measured. Judged. Even now, the hairs on his neck rose. He wasn't sure if it was fear. Or recognition. Or something worse. Belief. He logged the time with a slower hand. The map did not breathe. Chapter 3, Solia. She hadn't slept. The cold, artificial lights of Sector B flickered on slowly, casting long, pale shadows across the prototype hall. The soft, mechanical whir of ventilation mixed with the faint buzz of dormant machinery. Solia sat cross-legged on the grated floor, arms wrapped around her knees, her back resting against the coolant column that housed Dawn's outer shell. The low, steady hum of the cooling system vibrated beneath her skin, a lifeline, a heartbeat she both relied on and feared. But it hadn't been steady all night. Sharp spikes had rattled the silence, jolting her senses awake like distant thunder. Each time, pain flared behind her eyes, as if something inside her skull had flinched or pulsed in protest. She hadn't logged the spike. Not when it happened. Not after. There was no protocol for hearing your own name whispered by a machine that shouldn't speak. The air smelled faintly of ozone and cooling gel, tinged with the dry, metallic scent of heated circuit boards left exposed too long. A mug of coffee, forgotten and cold, rested near her foot, its rim stained with her lip print from restless hours past. The prototype hall stretched long and narrow, walls lined with half-decommissioned consoles, hanging cables, and lifeless monitors. Dust motes drifted lazily through thin beams of light, settling on idle keyboards and cracked screens. The quiet here was thick, almost suffocating. She was alone. Just her. And Dawn. Dawn wasn't just hardware. It was once designed as a predictive monitor for Flux behavior, a diagnostic mind. But over the cycles, it had become something else. Its dark casing absorbed the dim light, the soft pulsing beneath its shielded surface like a heartbeat faint enough to question. It was a machine that had outgrown its cage, or perhaps one waiting for release. And it wasn't the only system reacting. Anchor, Dawn's failsafe interface, had been installed to filter and stabilize inputs. It was supposed to catch anomalies, dampen psychic echoes, suppress rogue signals. Yet each time Solia felt that spike of pain, she knew Anchor had responded too late, or not at all. It wasn't that Anchor had failed. It had tried. She could feel the resistance in her head, like pressure behind her eyes, like something deep in her mind tightening to hold back a tide. But whatever was pushing through was stronger, or older. Not a signal to be filtered, but a key already wired into her. An Anchor was reacting, violently, almost desperately. The neural sync logs had surged when the intrusion came. It treated her like a corrupted node, trying to isolate her. Like she was part system. It didn't recognize her as human. Not fully. Not anymore. She rose slowly and approached Dawn's shell, staring at the dark, humming machine. Her hand hovered above it. "It wasn't you that spoke to me, was it?" she whispered. The hum didn't change. There was no response. But she wasn't asking for one. She studied the interface's dark sheen for a long moment. "But if it wasn't you, then who? And why did Anchor react to me like I was some kind of system?" Her voice dropped. Her fingers brushed the interface panel. The memory came unbidden, the first time she'd seen Dawn, still a junior tech. The console had displayed a warning, bright and stark: "Observe, do not engage." Her instructor had dismissed it as dead code, but when she leaned closer, she'd caught the faintest scent of burnt dust and saffron oil, an impossible echo of her mother's hidden lab beneath their old home. A place Solia had only been told about in whispers. A place sealed after the collapse. Flashback. The lab lay cloaked in shadows, bathed only in the pale flicker of ancient holoscreens and the low, rhythmic pulse of an energy core humming deep beneath the floor. The air hung heavy with the acrid tang of solder and the faint, lingering scent of dried herbs tucked away in dusty jars, whispers of a world already crumbling. Solia's small hands trembled as they traced the edge of a cluttered workbench, scattered with glowing schematics and half-finished devices. Her mother moved with fierce urgency, every motion precise yet weary, fingers dancing over controls that pulsed with a soft, azure light. "Stay close," her mother urged softly, voice tight with worry, never quite meeting Solia's wide, searching eyes. "Time is running thin." Suddenly, the sharp metallic knock of the heavy door echoed down the steel corridor. The entrance hissed open, revealing a taller girl stepping inside, her eyes bright and steady, carrying a calm that seemed out of place in this fragile sanctuary. "Orianthe," her mother breathed, relief threading through exhaustion. Orianthe's gaze fell on Solia, whose heart beat faster beneath the steady stare. "Hello," she said gently, voice warm as a quiet flame. "They told me you'd be here." Solia's throat tightened. "I don't remember," she whispered. "You will," Orianthe promised, a faint smile curling her lips. "We are bound by more than memory. We'll need each other, more than you know." Together they bent over glowing schematics, voices barely above whispers. The lab seemed to pulse with their shared urgency, ancient machines humming quietly in sympathy as fragile plans were woven to protect secrets neither fully understood. The room shifted again. The heavy door creaked open, admitting an elder woman whose presence demanded attention. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked onto Solia with unsettling clarity. "You must understand this," the elder said, voice steady and resolute. "The knowledge you carry is a threat, to yourself and to all who would seek to control it. They will come for you. They will try to bind you." Solia's grip tightened on the bench's edge, a shiver racing through her spine. Fear and an unnamed dread coiled tight in her chest. Her mother's voice broke through the silence, soft but unyielding. We will protect her, but some truths must be sealed away. Locked tight. For her own safety. The lab's door hissed again, but this time, not with calm. A figure burst through, Chris Corrin, breathless and wild-eyed, fists clenched at his sides. "You're not doing this," he growled. "She's just a child." "Solia, stay behind me," he added, glancing over his shoulder at her, jaw tight with fear and fury. "Chris," their mother began, warning in her voice. No, he stepped between Solia and the oncoming figures. "You said you'd keep her safe. That doesn't mean turning her into this." Two technicians entered behind him, faces hidden by worn, expressionless masks. They carried a cold, intricate device, an implant designed to cage her mind and silence what should not be heard. Chris moved to block their path, fists raised. "You're not touching her." One technician reached for a stun baton. But then Orianthe stepped forward, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the tension like glass. "Chris. Look at me." He hesitated, only for a breath, but it was enough. His eyes locked with hers. "She needs you to be strong right now," she said quietly. "Not loud. Not reckless. Just strong." His jaw trembled, anger and grief clashing in his chest. "You don't know what they're doing to her." "I do," Orianthe said. "And I will never leave her. You have my word." Chris's shoulders shook. For a moment, it looked as though he might cry. Then he nodded, just once, before the technicians moved in. The elder woman gave a curt signal. Two figures grabbed Chris from behind, dragging him away despite his renewed struggle. "Chris!" Solia cried out, reaching for him. "Don't forget me," he shouted, straining against their grip. "Don't let them take you from yourself." Orianthe turned back to Solia, brushing a lock of hair from her brow. Her eyes were steady, filled with unspoken promises. "This is not the end," she whispered fiercely. "It is only the beginning. We will find each other again, no matter what." Pain flared suddenly, a white-hot crackle behind Solia's eyes as the implant activated. Darkness closed over her memories like a shutter falling. The last image to fade was Chris's outstretched hand, and Orianthe's unwavering gaze, a beacon in the encroaching void. Now, curiosity had curdled into something heavier. A weight she carried alone. Her eyes flicked toward the embedded lens in the ceiling, black, unblinking. Standard monitoring tech. Passive. Harmless. But deep inside, something told her the true I was elsewhere. Not in White City. Not even in the room. She crossed to the secondary interface. Her fingers moved toward a half-forgotten bypass script. It wasn't in the current stack. It wasn't in any approved archive. And yet, she didn't remember learning it. It felt like muscle memory left behind by someone else. She typed. Each keystroke echoed in the hall. A new prompt appeared. Access, shade line. No files registered. Trace signature detected. Orianthe. She froze. The word wasn't typed. It appeared, unbidden, glowing softly. Seconds stretched. Then the prompt blinked out. The logs cleared. Nothing remained. She looked back at Dawn. Its hum deepened, as though holding its breath. Her heart ticked faster than the machine's rhythm. "You heard me yesterday. Didn't you?" she whispered. But in her mind, she felt the pressure build again. Anchor was bracing. Whatever signal had come through, it was back. Pushing. And this time it hurt. Behind her eyes, a sharp ache flared, like teeth grinding behind bone. Like metal pressing inward from somewhere it didn't belong. She gritted her teeth. Something was inside her. Not metaphor. Fact. Upper Court Chamber, White City. Architect Kalen Thorne stood before a cascade of glowing data. The chamber around him hummed with sterile rhythm. Mira Solis stood nearby, posture taut, arms folded. The hum here was always wrong, too constant. Like it was waiting to shift. She ran a bypass, Mira said. Obscure. Pre-collapse script. Not in our approved stack. Result? Blank terminal. Then a ping from Dawn. 2 seconds. Then silence. Thorne exhaled slowly. Did she touch anchor? No. But the core's hum changed. Same resonance pattern from the night of Anth woke. He steadied himself. Everything echoes. You're not surprised, Mira said. I'm trying not to be. She's not just reacting. She's aligned, with Avanth, the shard, the silences. This is convergence. And that scares you? No, Mira said coldly. What scares me is that it might not be coincidence. If this is a signal chain, Thorne murmured, something is listening. You think the Mechs will react? I think they already have. We just haven't noticed yet. She lowered her voice. Did we make a mistake with Avanth? He didn't answer. Prototype Hall. Solia flinched. The tone hadn't come from the console. It came from inside Dawn. The hum deepened. The air thickened. Flickers danced in the overhead lights. No alarms. No errors. Just presence. Her hand pressed to Dawn's chilled casing. What are you? She whispered. The warmth beneath her palm shifted. Though Dawn made no sound. She felt the answer. It had started breathing again. Observation room above Prototype Hall. The image flickered across the primary monitor, rendered in pale surveillance tones, muted color, low contrast. Solia stood alone in the center of the Prototype Hall, one hand just lifting from Dawn's casing. Her posture was tense now, withdrawn. Merrick Vell sat behind the observation console, eyes locked on the feed. The room around him was dark but for the glow of instrument panels. He'd rewound the footage 3 times already. No breach. No voice command. No system call. Just her. Her lips had moved, barely. No audio came through. No alarms. No anomalies. Just a rising presence in the air, like static holding its breath. He leaned forward, watching her shift slightly. She wasn't confused. She wasn't afraid. She knew. A chime sounded from the corridor. Come in, he said flatly. The door whispered open. Dr. Corval Day stepped into the room, coat still faintly creased from the medbay, eyes shadowed by long hours. Still watching her, he asked quietly, closing the door behind him. Merrick gestured to the screen without looking up. She touched the interface. Not part of protocol. Not a test. Something else. He rewound the footage again and let it play back silently. Corval moved beside him, studying the monitor. Solia stood still, her hand hovering just off Dawn's curved shell. The machine did nothing. And yet, something had shifted. No spike in vitals. Calm as a lake, Merrick murmured. But Dawn registered, breath. Not from her. From the machine. They watched in silence. It's not the first time she stood at the edge of something bigger than her, Corval said softly. Merrick's fingers stilled. A memory rose, unbidden. A chamber. Long ago. The same girl. But not alone. A brother at her side. Chris Corrin. Don't, he muttered, too late. Corval's voice dropped lower, brittle with memory. It's been 8 years. And I still see the moment it happened. He remained silent. The air felt heavier. There was a power loop in the cradle grid. Residual from the neural containment attempt. It should have been dormant, isolated. But Chris. He stepped between Solia and the technician. Pushed the tool arm away. Knocked the casing loose. Merrick could still see it, the flash, the convulsion, the unnatural stillness. It backfed through the mainframe, Corval whispered. 50,000 volts, chest to spine. I tried. I kept trying. Even after the neural map flatlined. You weren't at fault, Merrick said, eyes fixed on the monitor. I was 6 steps away. I can still feel every one of them. I gave the clearance, Merrick replied. The implant. The protocol. We told them it was safe. He only came because she asked, Corval said. She was terrified. He came to protect her. On the screen, Solia's hand dropped fully away. She stood quietly, her eyes half closed, head tilted slightly, listening to something they couldn't hear. Prototype hall. The chamber was still. Solia flinched. The tone hadn't come from the console. It came from inside Dawn. The hum deepened. The air thickened. Flickers danced in the overhead lights, brief, stuttering pulses, like a breath too old to remember its shape. No alarms. No errors. Just presence. She blinked, once, slow, as if the room had shifted around her. The lights seemed too bright, the silence too wide. Her hand pressed to Dawn's chilled casing. What are you? She whispered. The warmth beneath her palm shifted. Though Dawn made no sound. She felt the answer. It had started breathing again. And as it did, something in her chest cracked open, small, hairline, but real. A memory pushed forward, jagged and too bright. A flash of white light. The scent of scorched metal and ozone. A scream, her own. Her brother's body collapsing in a tangle of limbs and sparks. Someone was yelling. Gloves pressing her down. The panic in her throat too big for her lungs. And over it all, the doctor's voice, tight and shaking. He's gone. He's gone. Get her under, now. Solia's breath caught. Her hand recoiled from the casing. Dawn remained silent now, but the air around it pulsed, slow and steady, like the breath of something once dead trying to remember life. She stepped back. Just once. Her mouth trembled, but she said nothing. The lights stopped flickering. The hum faded. Observation room, return. Corval leaned in, voice a whisper. What do you think she's hearing? Merrick didn't answer right away. A long silence. Then Corval straightened. I want a neural scan. Full spectrum. Quiet channel. He hadn't dared pull one before. Not because he didn't care, because he feared what he might find. You think the memory's coming back? I think it never fully left. And I want to see it before it reclaims her. Merrick nodded slowly. You'll have clearance. Use vault access. Off-grid. She never once asked me why he died. Not once. She looked at me like she already knew. Merrick remained alone, staring at the screen. Then, almost reluctantly, he reached for the secondary terminal. A long-used archive login flashed. He entered the code. Archive, Corin, Chris. Classified, retrieval restricted. Override code accepted. A file loaded. A photo. 17. Sharp gaze. Thin smile. Bright eyes. Merrick sat in silence. You wanted to protect her, he murmured. Now she's the only one left who might save the rest of us. And beneath the layers of steel and silence, Dawn kept breathing. Chapter 4, Return Protocol. They came in through the east corridor, silent, limping, eyes wide and haunted by shadows that didn't belong. 3 jeeps rumbled through the narrow, fluorescent-lit passage, 2 still operable, the third trailing thick black smoke and sputtering sparks from a mangled undercarriage scorched by the violet burst that had hurled them out of the relay perimeter. The acrid, choking stench of burnt fuel and scorched circuitry hung heavy in the recycled air, mingling with the faint coppery scent of blood and the sterile tang of fierce sweat. Lieutenant Sarah Dorn was the first to step down. Her right arm dangled uselessly, wrapped in bloodied blast tape that had dried stiff and cracked. Her face was pale, tight with exhaustion, skin drawn over high cheekbones, eyes rimmed red but burning with a fierce, raw defiance. Every movement was slow, deliberate, a fragile rebellion against the weight of survival. Behind her, Corporal Lennox limped, his face a grim tableau of torn flesh and embedded ceramic shards, each step cautious beneath the clinical, unforgiving lights. Private Het carried a data core wrapped in thermal cloth, his hands trembling so violently it was a wonder he held it at all, as if the device itself was the only thing tethering him to sanity. Kalen Thorne observed from the inner ring observation panel, jaw clenched tight, eyes narrowed to steel slits. Mira Solis stood rigid beside him, arms crossed, lips pressed into a hard, unyielding line. Her fingers twitched once, barely perceptible, fighting the urge to grip the cold metal rail, the only outlet for the storm building inside. "They shouldn't be alive," Mira said flatly, her voice brittle with disbelief and simmering rage. "No," Thorne replied, voice low but edged with steel. "But I want to know why they are." The hatch hissed open, releasing a suffocating wave of stale, heated air thick with antiseptic and a primal, palpable tension that settled over the room like a shroud. Debriefing Chamber 6. The team sat at the edge of the long steel table, bandaged, sweat-streaked, weighted with silence. Flickering overhead lights cast jittery, unreliable shadows on faces etched with pain, disbelief, and deeper truths left unspoken. The air reeked of chemicals and tension, thick enough to choke. Across from them sat Thorne, Mira, and Corin Vex, each a silhouette of authority, hard-eyed and unmoving. Myra's gaze flicked to Thorne, searching for assurance, but his expression was granite, unreadable. Sarah's voice cracked the silence, hoarse, brittle. "It didn't malfunction. It woke up." Thorne leaned forward, fists tight. "Clarify." "The relay didn't reject the command chain. It evaluated us. Then, purged us." Mira leaned in, fingers steepled. Her boots scraped softly on the floor, an unspoken challenge. "Weapons? Turrets, drones. It just forced us out. Like we were intruders. Like we didn't belong." Het placed the data core on the table, his trembling hands slow and reverent. "This was the last thing we pulled before the lockout. Fragmented, but it carries a pulse. A recognition signature." Corin activated the core. A warped feed flickered, static and shifting geometry. At its center, 5 human figures inside the relay. Motionless. "Accepted." Myra's voice sharpened. "Who are they?" Het whispered, "Silas Kane's team. They arrived after we were ejected. The system kept them." The room froze. Mira and Vex exchanged a heavy glance. She nodded slowly. He looked away. Thorne's voice cut through the silence. "Describe what happened just before the expulsion." Dorn shifted. There was something. A low frequency. Internal. Not audible. Then light. Gold-blue arcs. The walls realigned. Like the relay reshaped itself around them. Even the hum of the vents seemed to hesitate. So the relay made a choice. "Not ours," Dorn muttered. "It chose. We were noise." Mira turned to Thorne. "This shatters everything. We've lost control." Vex added, voice calm but grim, "And now they're inside. No oversight. No fallback." Thorne's silence stretched. Finally, he murmured, "No. We lost control weeks ago. We just didn't know it." Selrook watched the report flicker to life. His fingers froze above the console. The footage confirmed it, the relay was active, and it had chosen a new anchor. Evanth lay suspended in his cradle, limbs slack, breath shallow. But the air around him had changed, thick, electric. Like the moment before a breach. In the shadows behind him, he stirred. A heartbeat. Or a warning. The temperature in the vault dropped by 1/2 degree. A faint tremor passed through the floor, too subtle for sensors, too primal to ignore. Sel had felt this once before, 17 years ago, when Avanth first arrived. It had taken months to forget the feeling. Now it was back. He took a breath, his voice barely above a whisper. You were waiting. Far above, men still spoke as if the relay answered to them. But the vault remembered older names. And one of them had just woken up. Chapter 5, Vault Signal. The vault stirred, not with noise or motion, but with memory. Deep in the buried infrastructure beneath White City, Crypt 7 began a subtle shift. The lights dimmed, casting long shadows on walls thick with dust and time. Atmospheric pressure dropped imperceptibly, like the slow exhale of something long dormant awakening from a century of silence. A low, haunting alert tone began, a distant, haunting hum that threaded through the corridors like a ghostly breath. Magnetic sensors recalibrated themselves without instruction, whispering in silent code. Ancient lights flickered weakly for the first time in decades, casting hesitant patterns across steel surfaces. The scent of ozone mixed with recycled lubricant, and something far older, like petrichor trapped beneath layers of metal and stone. A faint vibration rippled through the foundation, not seismic, but deliberate. Circuits blinked in slow, deliberate rhythms. Backup power arrays activated without prompt, as if the vault had finally inhaled after centuries of quiet. Something was awakening. Something that hadn't stirred since the Red Protocol sealed the city's fate long ago. Lieutenant Selrook stood alone in the lift descending beyond all known levels. Past charted vaults. Beyond secure archives. Those depths had always been forbidden, inaccessible. Not now. He lifted his communication device, voice tight with cautious anticipation. Rook here, something's happening. I'm going to investigate. He was going deeper, into the unknown. Somewhere even Mira Solis had never been cleared to enter. His matte black coat bore faded glyphs at the collar, marks of rank and lineage, worn smooth with age and quiet authority. His boots echoed sharply against the cold, metallic floor, each step a stark reminder, this place had been abandoned, yet it was far from lifeless. He carried no weapon. He wondered why. He always carried a weapon. Only a ring of encrypted glyphs wrapped around his left wrist, glowing faintly, a coded heritage, an access key passed down like a burden and a curse. The lift shuddered as it descended, cables creaking softly, groaning under unseen strain. The hum of dormant systems began to stir, faint but insistent, as if the vault were breathing, waking from a long slumber. Strange, discordant tones echoed through the shaft, almost like a whispered language made of electrical pulses and mechanical sighs. The lift sighed to a halt. Sealbreaker level reached, a computerized voice in tone with sterile precision. Sel's breath caught. The word Sealbreaker stirred something buried deep, a fragment of memory, half-remembered warnings and cryptic mentions he'd long pushed aside. He didn't fully understand it, but he knew enough to feel the weight of it pressing down. Air hissed, valves clicked open somewhere beyond the door. The thick metal barrier before him groaned, a sluggish, grinding resistance betraying ancient mechanisms that hadn't moved in decades. A blast of cold met him, not natural chill, but the precise, clinical temperature of a preserved machine. Stabilized. Preserved. The vault wasn't dead. It had merely gone silent. Sel stepped forward, his senses alert. The faint clatter of a rusted container box tipping to the ground echoed sharply through the silence, shattering the stillness with a hollow clang. A clatter echoed somewhere deep in the shadows, sending a ripple of unease down Sel's spine. The software of motors hummed to life, then a pulse of light flickered far ahead, revealing faint geometric patterns lining the walls, glyphs reacting subtly to his presence. His breath caught. The silence pressed in around him, heavy and expectant. He stepped into the darkness, nerves alight. The unknown awaited. Vault core chamber. 3 levels deep. Octagonal, cavernous. Every wall lined with servers too old to bear nameplates, yet humming, alive with purpose. Power cables, thick as tree limbs, twisted through walls like arteries, pulsing faintly with unseen currents. The hum was not mechanical but measured, slow, deliberate, like breath. Dust motes danced in currents invisible to the eye. Evantha's cradle was not the only system buried here. Sel moved silently along the perimeter. His breath fogged in the frigid air. Terminals blinked awake as he passed, registering his presence, unlocking with reluctance, as if waking from a century-long sleep. One screen flickered, then steadied. Status: anomalous relay activity confirmed. Vault signal integrity, nominal. Failsafe mode, standby. Sel traced the screen's edge with one knuckle, feeling the cold metal beneath his finger. Another file appeared. Older. Corrupted. Titled only, Sealbreaker. He hesitated. Fingers lingering. The name stirred buried warnings in his mind. He loaded it. The schematic unfolded, not a neat diagram but a labyrinthine web of containment nodes, feedback loops, and a central disruptor core. It wasn't built to destroy the relay. It was designed to blind it, sever its awareness, unmake parts of what had awoken. Sealbreaker wasn't a machine. It was a design principle, encoded across deep systems. A networked silence. A failsafe trigger only when threat conditions matched a precise profile. A weapon hidden in stillness. Dangerous even to wield. The warning echoed anew in his thoughts: if it wakes again, you'll need more than bullets. You'll need silence. He had dismissed the voice once, paranoia in an old mentor's final words. But surrounded by humming servers and icy breath, it felt no longer paranoia. It felt like prophecy. Behind him, another cradle hummed to life. Soft blue light seeped from its seams. A nameplate flickered beneath frost. Unit ID, Lyra_09. Not Evanth. Not inert. The figure inside was humanoid. Narrow shoulders. Delicate, almost fragile in structure. Filaments of light curled along its limbs, slow, deliberate pulses, like synaptic breaths. Sel stepped back, a shiver crawling down his spine. A faint warmth radiated from the pod, but beneath it lurked a chilling sovereignty, silent, watchful, commanding. Then he heard it, his name. Whispered. A voice like silk woven with steel. Beautiful, soft-spoken, but terrifying in its quiet authority. Lyra. Sel had read about her, a hybrid construct, designed before the final city broke ground. Buried under layers of protocol and silence. Lyra wasn't an AI. Wasn't a weapon. She was a mirror, not just of thought, but of intention. Built to interface with relay consciousness, mimic its patterns, reflect its impulses, and if needed, suppress them. If the relay reached out, Lyra's reflection would greet it, perfect, false, delaying. Not to oppose. To match. To make it hesitate. Lyra was never meant to lead. She was meant to contain. To confuse. To stall. She hadn't been activated in decades, not since the Red protocols were written. Most assumed she was inert by design, an experiment or myth. But Sel had seen the files. Read the warnings. Lyra was part of Sealbreaker. Not a command unit. Not an override. A reflection. All these security systems, Sel murmured, and we're not even a bank? He stepped closer to the cradle, heart hammering in his chest. His eyes traced the elegant coils of light, the quiet breath within the shell. If you're waking, he whispered, then something's already listening. A faint pulse rippled through Lyra's limbs, almost imperceptible, a subtle response to a strain far beneath them. A silent signal from the anchor, faltering, overloading. Her eyes flickered briefly, reflecting that unseen disturbance. If Sealbreaker is listening, it means it feels threatened. Command Tower, White City. Far above, Mira Solis paced the command tower, boots clicking a staccato rhythm across polymer tiles. Walls crowded with feeds offered no answers. Thorn had not returned. The injured teen was stable. Vex stood beside the comms array, silent, eyes fixed on shifting static. No signal. No lock. No return. Why hasn't it come back online? Mira muttered, frustration threading her voice. Vex adjusted the scanner's gain. Maybe it knows we're listening. Or it's waiting for something. Myra's eyes narrowed. Waiting for what? What else could be down there that we don't know about? Vex shrugged, but his eyes betrayed unease. The vault is a fortress of secrets. Centuries-old tech layered with protocols, many lost, many classified. We only scratched the surface. A nearby technician leaned in, voice edged with anxiety. How much of it is even salvageable? What if the systems have evolved, or worse, corrupted? Mira clenched her jaw. That's what scares me. We're poking a sleeping giant. And it's not just about the relay or Crypt 7. What else is buried down there? Vex's gaze flicked to the main display. There are whole wings we've never accessed. Security lockdowns, encrypted failsafes. Rumors of experimental constructs, data vaults even the top brass deny exist. Myra's voice dropped to a whisper. How many of those are still active? How many could be hostile? Too many unknowns, Vex admitted. And with Lyra activating, it's a clear sign something's wrong. Or maybe everything. From the lower decks, Commander Kale Driss's voice cut through the comms, sharp and impatient. Clarification requested. Who exactly is Lyra? And why is she causing such a stir? Mira hesitated, eyes locked on flickering readouts. She's a construct, buried deep within the vault. Part of Sealbreaker. A protocol, a failsafe. Not a weapon in the usual sense, but designed to contain something far worse. Driss frowned. Sealbreaker's just a myth in most of the files I've seen. No real structure, no real purpose. Vex responded calmly, it's not a structure. It's a condition. A threshold protocol. If Lyra is active, it means the system believes that threshold has been crossed. Myra's gaze darkened. We don't need miracles. We need hesitation. Another technician interjected, voice edged with disbelief. But what if hesitation isn't enough? What if we've already lost control? Silence fell over the room as the weight of unknowns pressed down on them. Mira exhaled slowly. Then we prepare for whatever comes next. Vault core chamber, continued. Lyra's form shifted subtly, as if breathing, not with lungs, but with the slow, deliberate pulse of circuits awakening after centuries of dormancy. The light tracing her limbs deepened to an almost hypnotic glow, casting fractured reflections on the cold metal walls. Her eyes, vast pools of shifting mercury in liquid starlight, held the weight of millennia, an intelligence vast and unyielding, yet veiled behind an inscrutable calm. Her voice returned, soft, melodic, yet layered with an uncanny resonance that seemed to vibrate directly within Cell's mind. Each word was measured, deliberate, a whispered symphony of power and seduction. There was no haste in her speech, only a patient certainty that sent a chill down his spine. You call me awakening, but I have only stirred to protect the balance you threaten to unravel. Her gaze fixed on Cell, penetrating and disarming. The anchor falters. The relay reaches beyond its cage. I am the shadow between pulses, the quiet breath that holds the storm at bay. Around her, the ambient hum of the vault grew dense, almost suffocating. The lights flickered erratically, responding to her presence as if the very fabric of the vault bent and warped in her will. In the stillness, Cell could hear a low, rhythmic vibration, not mechanical, but alive, resonating through the chamber and into his bones. She extended a slender hand, fingers tracing an impossible pattern in the air. Invisible glyphs shimmered briefly before fading, a silent invocation of power and control. The warmth radiating from her was no longer comforting, it was unsettling, a living paradox, both invitation and warning. You must decide, Selrook, she whispered, voice dropping to a breathless murmur that seemed to echo endlessly. Will you be the herald of order, or the architect of chaos? Cell's breath caught. He felt the gravity of her presence, the weight of destinies hanging in the balance. This was no simple construct or protocol. Lyra was a sovereign force, an ancient guardian woven from light and shadow, whose awakening was both salvation and doom. The Last Vigil. 1,000 years ago, the world was different, lush and vibrant, alive with the pulse of countless civilizations. The skies once stretched clear and endless above sprawling cities of glass and steel. Rivers ran free, forests teemed with life, and the hum of creation echoed through the land. Empires rose and fell, their legacies buried beneath the soil, layered like sediment in the deep bones of the earth. It was a time of promise, but also of hubris, the delicate balance between progress and destruction fragile as a whisper. Now, the horizon burned with fire and shadow, a furious, relentless scar stretching across the planet's surface. Great fissures tore through the Earth's crust, molten rivers spilled like fresh wounds into fractured seas, and the sky churned with ash and smoke that blotted out the sun's light for days on end. Thunder rolled like the planet's dying heartbeat, a low, unending roar echoing through shattered mountains and broken dreams. The air trembled with heat and despair, thick with the acrid scent of ozone, scorched stone, and lost futures. But what had brought the world to this precipice was lost to memory. Was it war, a dying star, or something older still? The answer lay buried beneath layers of time, beneath the ruins and ashes, whispered only in fragmented prophecies and fading dreams. High above, massive starships hovered in the thin upper atmosphere, monolithic and serene. Their armored hulls gleamed beneath ashen clouds, reflecting the chaos below like silent sentinels standing guard. Along their edges, veins of blue and green light pulsed rhythmically, beating like a heart struggling to hold on, a last breath held in defiance. Within the largest ship's grand sanctum, the true seers gathered, a council older than memory itself. Cloaked in robes woven from threads of light and memory, their faces bore the weight of centuries, etched with lines carved by wisdom, sorrow, and the unbearable burden of prophecy. The very air around them hummed faintly with ancient energy, a quiet symphony of power held in delicate balance. They were architects and keepers of secrets both terrible and sacred, the creators of the vault and the relay, whose monumental works lay buried deep beneath the trembling earth. They were the final guardians of a dying world's legacy. The youngest seer, Arya, stood with her fists clenched, jaw tight. Though her voice was calm, her eyes betrayed a storm of doubt. She had lost everything to the collapse: family, home, and faith. "We stand at the threshold," she said softly. "Between oblivion and hope. The vault pulses beneath us, restless, awakening. The relay stirs again. We have delayed the inevitable too long. The cost, it breaks my heart." Her words hung heavy in the chamber, rippling through the assembly like a fragile flame flickering in the wind. At the back, Elder Marone's gaze lingered on Arya. His weathered hands trembled slightly, not from age but from the weight of memories. He remembered a time when hope was plentiful, when the stars had not yet dimmed. "We have foreseen the ending," he intoned, voice steady despite the pain beneath, and the beginning beyond it. "We carry the burden of memory, the spark of hope, and the promise of return. We are the keepers, the last line before oblivion." Behind him, the great celestial map rotated slowly, a tapestry of stars, forgotten constellations, and distant worlds unseen by mortal eyes. The Exodus was no mere flight, it was a sacred pilgrimage. Near the edge of the room, Seer Loren paced restlessly. His eyes darted to the viewport, watching the charred earth below. "I do not believe this Exodus will save us all," he muttered under his breath. "Some will be left to rot, forgotten beneath the ash." "What legacy is that?" Arya's gaze snapped to him, pain and defiance mingling. "Better to flee and live than perish clinging to ruins." Loren's eyes flashed. "Better to stand and fight than become ghosts wandering starships." The room fell into tense silence. The fragile unity of centuries trembled on the brink. Another seer, his hands scarred from centuries of sacrifice, stepped forward and gestured toward the vault's pulsing core beneath the crystalline floor. His voice was low but resolute. "This is our charge. The vault holds the truth of our past, the essence of what we built and feared. It is our guardian, our sentinel. We bind it with our will and wisdom. It shall watch while we are gone. It shall wait." Nearby, Arya clutched the shard, a crystalline fragment glowing softly with an inner light. Its gentle pulse was a heartbeat, a fragile promise. She allowed herself a fleeting smile, the faintest light in a gathering storm. But tension simmered beneath the surface of the gathering. Doubt, fear, and defiance flickered in the eyes of some. Not all believed the Exodus was salvation. Some whispered of resistance. Others feared what they might awaken by fleeing. The engines roared to life, their vibrations echoing through the ship's frame and into the bones of those aboard. The starships lifted, piercing the choking clouds, ascending into the cold embrace of the stars. Below, the earth convulsed, mountains shattered, oceans surged in apocalyptic waves, and the winds carried the final cries of a world letting go. As the great vessels vanished into the void, the vault and relay remained, silent, watchful, awake. And in that silence, the first stirrings of a new dawn began. Chapter 6, Within the Signal. Where are Orianthe and the boy? Silas Kane asked, his voice low but edged with concern. No one answered. Lex glanced back down the corridor, frowning. They were behind us, I thought. But once we breached the core passage. I haven't seen them. Rel shook his head. No comms. No signal. Just gone. Silas took a long breath, one hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. He didn't draw it. He wasn't afraid, not yet. But the absence gnawed at him. The relay station had accepted their presence, but now it felt as though it was choosing its own terms. Unseen by the others, Orianthe and the boy stood before an ancient junction buried deep within the relay. The boy's hand hovered over a console that shouldn't have existed, one the station itself had revealed only to them. It pulsed beneath his touch, soft and slow, like a heartbeat buried under centuries of silence. The shard across Orianthe's chest flickered gently, resonating in tandem. They weren't navigating the system. They were sending something out. And something answered. The response didn't come from the relay itself, but through it. The direction was unmistakable, White City. Corwin Marrell, an exiled engineer once blamed for a cascading failure in White City's core net, stepped into the glow. He had come with Silas's group under cover of silence, hoping for redemption or, at least, anonymity. He hadn't expected to witness this. Lex blinked in surprise. Corwin? Rel gave a short nod. Didn't think we'd find you this deep. Corwin didn't take his eyes off the console. Didn't think I'd follow you this far either. But I couldn't ignore this. A memory caught him unbidden, the shrieking hum of collapsing circuits, the smell of burnt ozone, the horrified silence as the energy lattice failed. Corwin had warned them. Had begged for a systems check. But when the network glitched and wiped a quarter of White City's eastern grid, the blame came swiftly. Politics needed a scapegoat. He had been convenient. Stripped of clearance, reputation, and identity, Corwin had vanished into the fringe settlements. It was Silas who found him years later in Rustbrook, repairing broken pumps and solar units with a quiet precision. Silas didn't ask for apologies. He asked for help. Now here he stood, beneath the relay's breath, the boy's hand glowing with communion. He froze. The boy and Orianthe stood haloed in light and code, the air alive with resonance. He recognized the console interface instantly, not designed by the relay, but awakened through it. It was seer-coded. Forbidden. Unmapped. Alive. His voice was barely a whisper. Are you interfacing with the relay? Orianthe's eyes opened. The glow eased. The console dimmed. She turned to him, not startled, but aware. Her voice was low, steady. Not just the relay. We're beyond its boundaries now. Corwin stepped forward slowly. That level of access, root layer and above, you can't even touch that without a 4-key clearance. What's he doing? She looked at the boy, now standing motionless. Calm. Still. He isn't breaking in, she said. He's being welcomed. The boy extended his hand and touched a node. A second console unfolded from the floor, encoded in glyphs not seen since before the fall. His fingers moved, not randomly, but with purpose. He wasn't guessing. As he moved, a flicker of expression passed across his face, not blankness, but something deeper, recognition. And awe. Then, something else, resolve. Not forced or fearful, but chosen. His lips parted slightly as if a name rose in his memory, but he said nothing. Orianthe stepped closer, watching him. For a moment, her breath caught. Not from fear, but from the sheer, impossible intimacy of what was unfolding. It was like watching someone step into their own memory, like witnessing a dream take shape. Lines of deep red logic formed between the two interfaces. Orianthe laid her palm flat against the surface. A resonance initiated. From a few steps behind, Dre and Lisa arrived, drawn by the shift in resonance. Dre moved toward a side panel, eyes scanning. Lisa kept close, her scanner already active. "What the hell is this?" Dre muttered, eyes wide. Lisa's scanner blinked erratically. "That interface isn't even on the system maps. It's legacy code. Pre-fall, seer grade." Corwin turned sharply toward them. "Help me." Dre, monitor energy output. Lisa, check pressure across this whole junction. "I'll try to enhance the flow, give him everything he needs." Dre nodded and darted to a secondary port, tapping commands. Lisa dropped beside a conduit panel and yanked the access, tapping her readout into sync. Corwin stepped toward a small auxiliary cradle and routed power lines manually, sweat already forming across his brow. "This isn't technology," he said. "It's something older." He's aligning constructs that were never meant to be reconnected. The glyphs began pulsing. A deep tremor rolled through the station. Lights along the corridor shifted to deep crimson. From somewhere beneath them, a low harmonic rang out, too low to be structural. Too resonant to be mechanical. "Those systems, they're not native to the relay," Corwin murmured. "They're from the old vault schema." "What is he doing?" "Not just waking it," Orianthe said. "He's aligning it. Synchronizing the relay and the vault. And something else." The boy's eyes focused. His hand pressed deeper into the console. A ripple of force spilled outward, not air or sound, but raw intention echoing through the conduits. His voice, quiet and singular, whispered one word. "Begin." Dre stumbled back as a surge of static burst from his scanner. Something just overloaded anchor shielding. This isn't a diagnostic. It's an attack protocol." Corwin's wrist module lit up in warning. "That's not a tremor. That's a signal. Something just woke up." Orianthe watched the console, her expression now taut with intensity. "It's begun." She turned to Dre and Lisa. "Monitor the energy output. Feed everything to the relay's shadow buffer. Now." Corwin barked, "Lisa, pressure values. Dre, keep auxiliary open." They moved in sync, data pulsing across panels as screens flared and cables hummed. Below their feet, the relay's foundation pulsed once, then again. A pattern. A countdown. Dawn stirred in her cradle far below White City. Anchor's containment lattice contracted, responding to a threat not external, but ancestral. The vault murmured. Evanth pulsed. From the console, a cascading protocol initialized, Sealbreaker. A single sentry tower atop White City's perimeter blinked violently, then short-circuited in a burst of static light, its shielding coils smoking, its firewalls compromised. Corwin's voice was raw. "You've activated Sealbreaker. Do you understand what that means?" "I do now," Orianthe said. The console emitted a final pulse, brighter than before. From 1,000 buried nodes across the relay, red-laced filaments surged outward, spanning continents in a breath. White City felt it. So did the sky. And in a moment no one witnessed, somewhere between the codes and the corridors, the boy smiled, quietly, strangely, as if part of him had always known this would come. Not victory. Not defiance, but recognition. Silas pressed his palm flat to the curved wall. It was warm, not cold, sterile metal, but the slow, rhythmic pulse of something alive. His fingertips tingled. A scent drifted faintly, burnt dust and electric soil. It stirred something ancient in his memory, like the ruins of a bunker he'd once fled, now strangely welcoming. A name hovered on the tip of his tongue, one he didn't dare speak aloud. Lex stepped beside him, scanning the ark with a jury-rigged sensor. This place isn't metal. Not in any way we understand. Then what is it? Silas asked. Responsive matter, Lex replied. Synth-grown, maybe. Old tech, pre-fall, or older. It reads biofeedback. Responds to emotion. Rel looked up sharply. I just got a spike. Something deep just surged, like a heartbeat, and then a recoil. Lex glanced at him. Might be tied to that signal we felt earlier. Corwin was working with Orianthe when we left. Maybe they triggered something bigger. Rel nodded slowly. Whatever they did, the whole relay flinched. The walls around them shifted, very slightly. Not aggressively, but aware. Watching. Silas straightened. Something's changed. But the relay had already moved. And something much older had answered. Preparations began before dawn. The relay station was awake now, humming softly like something vast beneath ice. It no longer resisted them, but it watched. Everything inside had shifted. The hallways stayed lit. Panels no longer receded. Doors opened without sound. They were being guided, and it was time to move. Silas stood on the upper walkway, overlooking the hangar. Below, the Mechs were coming online, long dormant frames rising from their docks, limbs adjusting, sensors blinking to life. Hydraulic lines hissed. Cold steam lifted from reinitialized joints. The relay seemed to breathe with them, exhaling soft pulses of energy into the floor grids. The air was charged now, like the moment before lightning. Volunteers from Grave Point moved between them, checking systems, loading equipment. Some walked with discipline, others with hesitation. There were no uniforms, only patchwork armor, repurposed tech, and the quiet determination of those who had chosen to follow a cause instead of comfort. Many carried scars, some visible, some under their voices. Dane and Lex coordinated the supply crates, their voices low but efficient. Lex barked numbers and configuration codes, his tone clipped with focus. Dane lifted heavy modules with brute precision, sweat darkening the edges of his collar. He moved with practiced strength, but his eyes kept drifting to the relay's ceiling, as if he sensed it watching. Rel sat with a stripped-down terminal, rerouting fuel lines with quiet focus. His hands moved fast, memorized. He'd built half of his knowledge in the ruins, the other half under fire. He wiped his brow with the back of his glove and kept typing. Somewhere between the wires and the code, he felt a strange calm, as if the chaos outside couldn't touch him here. But a small voice whispered in his head, "This is bigger than wires." Orianthe and the engineers, Dre and Lisa, were back in the central processor chamber, where the shard had reacted strongest. The chamber's walls glowed faintly with residual charge, like veins carrying silent orders. "We found something else," Lisa said, crouched near an exposed junction. Her sleeves were rolled up, fingers smudged with compound gel. Sparks danced lightly as she fused two leads. Her jaw was tight, too tight, and her hands trembled slightly from caffeine or nerves. "What kind of something?" Orianthe asked, keeping her voice low. "A partial interface map. Pre-fall design. I think it shows subsystems buried under the mountain. Power relay junctions, mech interface points, something labeled cryothrone." Orianthe frowned. "That sounds deliberate." Dre added, "We thought this was a communication node. But it's more. It's a control hub. Not just signaling, but aligning." Orianthe looked back at the radial lines still glowing faintly around the shard. "It's like it's preparing something. Or someone. Behind her, a secondary panel flickered. Unknown language. Rapid glyphs. Then it went dark. She made a note, but didn't tell the others. A name had flashed across the interface, one she didn't recognize, but felt like it belonged to her. Her throat tightened. Had she seen it before, in a dream? A sealed file? Her mind wouldn't say. Back in the hangar, a short argument had broken out. "You really think marching straight to White City is smart?" one of the older volunteers said, adjusting the shoulder strap of his rifle. "They've got walls, sensors, drones. We're dead before we hit the sand." Silas's tone was calm, but final. "We're not sneaking. We're not hiding. They'll see us coming, and that's the point." Lex interjected, "If we go quiet, they'll assume the worst. A march forces the confrontation above ground. Assumes they don't just drop a satellite rail on us," Dane muttered, tightening a bolt on a Mech's shoulder. Silas didn't flinch. "If they had that in play, we'd already be gone." A quiet followed. It didn't mean agreement. But no one spoke again. The silence felt weighted, not uncertainty, but the gravity of what they'd all decided. A few feet away, one of the younger volunteers, barely 16, adjusted her arm guard with trembling fingers. Another tied a red ribbon around his wrist and whispered a name under his breath. Small rituals. Quiet dread. Each person held a different reason for being here. Some for vengeance. Some for family. Some for something less clear, the ache for change. Rel joined them late in the afternoon, rubbing his eyes. Megs are primed. Auxiliary packs mounted. Energy levels nominal. "Any glitches?" Silas asked. "Some. Minor AI flutter." One of them asked for a name. Silas paused. "Did you give it one?" "Yeah," Rel said, eyes distant. "I called it Hollow." Later, Lisa and Dre emerged from the chamber, still arguing quietly about power routing and sublayer harmonics. "The cryothrone interface uses pulse phasing," Lisa muttered. "That's not alignment, it's synchronization." "Same thing at this scale," Dre replied, "especially if the relay's syncing to more than just tech." Orianthe lingered a few steps behind, fingers brushing the wall without touching. She didn't speak. But she felt it again, something waiting below all of this. Watching through the walls. As if the station itself had chosen her, and was now measuring her pace. She caught her reflection in a smooth black panel, her eyes didn't look like her own. That night, Silas sat alone at the relay's outer ring, watching the horizon fade into violet ash. He hadn't spoken since dusk. A small photo was folded in his hand, a child's drawing, faded from sweat and age. A stick-figure family and a sun with too many rays. He tucked it back into his jacket as the wind changed. Not far off, Rel lay awake beneath one of the inactive loaders, staring at the ceiling. "Think we'll make it?" He whispered to no one. "Don't know," Lex replied from the shadows. "But if we don't try, we already didn't." Elsewhere, inside the sealed central node, the shard pulsed once. A single signal left the relay. Direction, unknown. They would march at dawn. Dawn broke softly, a fragile veil of pale light unfurling over fractured dunes and cracked earth. The sky, vast and tenuous, seemed to hold its breath, stretched thin as if the day might tear it apart. At the relay station, massive inner doors exhaled a long, mechanical sigh, sliding open with the measured precision of ancient machinery coming alive. The march was underway. 31 figures emerged from the shadows, stepping into a haze that thickened like smoke over smoldering embers. Their elongated shadows flickered across pale sands, bending in the weak, diffused light that fought to pierce the low-hanging clouds. At their head walked Silas Kane, his armor whispering faint protests with each step, the weight of his rifle a familiar pull across his back. His eyes, sharp and cold, pierced the horizon where violet bled into bruised gray, the sun a dim, distant orb behind ash-choked sky. The chill of dawn bit into exposed skin, but Silas felt nothing beyond the sharp focus tightening around his mind: strategy, memory, resolve. He spared a single backward glance, as if the relay might vanish without witness. Behind him, 6 Mechs groaned awake, ancient frames shuddering as hydraulics bled pressure. Armor plates flexed with deliberate strength, joints recalibrating as sensors lit the fog with piercing beams. Each step sent tremors through the ground, unearthing echoes of forgotten wars. Orianthe followed close, the shard cradled in a reinforced sling across her chest. With every pulse, a faint golden glow bled across her jacket and gloves, casting flickering shadows like whispered secrets. Her brow was knit with tangled hope and dread, a storm she dared not voice. Beside her, Lisa and Dre traded low, urgent whispers, flux anomalies, interference patterns, distortion spikes. Their scanners blinked with readings they couldn't quite interpret. Beneath the calm rhythm of their speech lay something brittle, a dread they didn't dare name. Corwin Marrell stood just beyond them, rerouting energy at a control splice he'd cracked open manually. Sweat dotted his temples, but his hands were steady, deliberate. "Still stabilizing output," he muttered. "Don't let up." Dre nodded once, adjusting dials with sharp, efficient taps. "Already bleeding through anchor levels." Lisa glanced toward Corwin. "We're seeing unknown harmonics. You sure this won't rupture the sublayer?" "No," he said flatly. "But it's too late to stop." Dane moved like a specter at their flank, silent, vigilant, immovable. His gaze swept every ridge and hollow, fingers twitched faintly against his rifle's grip. At the rear, Lex moved with near-reverent precision, weaving imperceptible gestures through neural strands, guiding mech formations with uncanny grace. His mask of calm cracked only in the moments between, his eyes flickering with the weight of command. They moved as one, synchronized, trained. But beneath their unity pulsed a quiet fear, shared and unspoken. The ground around them shifted subtly, dust curling in dry eddies around their boots. The air carried a tang, metallic, sharp, and laced with the fading memory of the relay's energy. Above, the sky stretched like silk drawn to breaking, and each breath of wind shimmered with electric anticipation. Back at the threshold, the boy lingered. He didn't speak. He didn't move. His gaze followed Orianthe like a tether, unseen threads linking him to fractured recollections. Beneath his fingers, the cracked concrete pulsed, once. A soft, deliberate thrum of presence. A memory that wasn't his. He shivered, and did not know why. Far to the south, another march pushed through barren sands. 10 men, wrapped in patchwork armor and scorched fabric, moved with grim purpose. Raiders, forged in fire and ruin, dragged scorched weapons looted from failed conquests. At their center strode Cress, a man marked by a single steel eye and 100 old scars. His jaw clenched against the wind. Behind them, a ruined crawler smoldered, a leftover from a failed Gravepoint raid. Its exhaust coughed a steady plume of black smoke into the dying air. No patrols. No drones. No flags, Cress muttered, voice low and bitter. One of his companions gave a dry chuckle. Tired of flags and lies. They pressed onward, into no man's land, an ancient scar still etched with the warnings of cycles past. The wind carried more than dust now. It carried memory. In Rustbrook, morning broke with slow defiance. Ash still coated rooftops. Smoke still curled from chimneys, but life moved, halting, stubborn. People worked. Panels were bolted back into place. Barricades reforged. Children carried water down narrow lanes, their laughter threading through soot-stained alleys. Elders soldered old circuit boards beneath patched tarps, their hands steady despite the years. Near the central square, a makeshift radio tower rotated with a tired grind, sending thin signals into a sky that no longer promised return. Miriam sat at its base, pencil tapping a slow rhythm against a weathered ledger. Trapper approached, his limp anchored by a new brace. "They should have sent something by now," he said, rough with unspoken worry. "They're not due yet," Miriam replied, though her voice betrayed a tightening edge. Her eyes didn't lift. Behind them, a child pointed to the sky. Why is it flickering? They turned. Saw only clouds. But Miriam's grip tightened. The flicker was real. And wrong. In White City, urgency had taken form. Sector ramps thundered as armored troop carriers rolled into position. Guardian units, black exoframes built for siege, stood at silent attention, servos humming. Inside the command dome, Kalen Thorne stood rigid before a glowing terrain display. His face was unreadable. Sel Rook stood beside him, voice level. 3 squads, long-range support, 2 Guardian units. Fully armed and cleared. Thorne nodded. Objective? Interception. Containment. Non-lethal preferred. Full force if necessary. In the vault? Sealed and locked. For now. In the corner, Aval 9, humanoid, still, watched. Its sensors flickered. They will reach the perimeter within 36 hours, the Sentinel said. Recommendation: initiate counter-engagement before elevation gain. Thorne's gaze remained fixed. Aval 9's tone shifted slightly. Probability clusters indicate divergence. This path was not anticipated. Sel frowned. Meaning? No answer came. Far below, deep within a scorched annex, 2 techs argued near a flickering console. The line's live again. We're losing sync. It's not them, one snapped. It's the relay. It's linking back. Behind them, a vault door clicked. Dust fell silently. A scanner blinked, uncertain. Then, a pulse. Faint. Intentional. Something stirred beyond the door. And it remembered. The march continued. They crested a long ridge by late morning. The terrain narrowed to a jagged pass. Silas paused, scanned the rise, then signaled forward. Rel glanced back once, toward the relay. The boy was still there. The relay's hum had faded. But its pull remained. They were going to White City. And the sky above was no longer watching. It was waiting. Cracks in orbit. The fleet hung in orbit, vast, wounded, and waiting. From a distance, it looked like stillness. Dozens of ships arrayed in silent procession, their hulls dulled by centuries of drift. But within, the age showed, flickering stabilizers, failing light veins, systems sighing through old threads. The seers had endured, but endurance had a cost. And below, something turned, distant, quiet, unnamed. Vessel, Veltharin dusk. Orbit path, drift eccentric. Core integrity, failing. The stabilizers groaned again, low, uneven. Ornith crouched beside the main spine thread, hands buried in frayed fiber. Her tools sparked where old alloy met fused repair. Heat bled from cracked panels and pulses too slow to reassure. The floor shuddered at irregular intervals, subtle, like the breath of a dying sleeper. Pressure differential unstable. Structural strain climbing, she muttered. Containment sheath is thinning. The ship's voice broke through the intercom in pieces. Priority route. Arkan's reach, reallocation requested. Ornith didn't answer. She simply glanced at the viewport beside her. Beyond the glass, the world drifted into partial view, obscured by darkness and light, featureless from orbit, offering nothing. She didn't know what waited there. No one did. That was the point. On Arkan's reach, the fleet assembly convened without ceremony. Saria stood before the central holosphere. Its projection spun slowly, fleet data, power loss ratios, and degradation patterns glowing across its surface. No image of the world below. That had been stripped from the display, by tradition or discomfort. 3 vessels are near failure, said Keth. Veltharin dusk, Tharas wake, Elene's veil. Atmospheric stability declining. Core systems are decoupling under stress. Valen's voice was sharp. Then descend. Or are we waiting to suffocate with dignity? Arya answered without turning. We wait because descent is not clarity, it's contact. And contact, we've learned, is risk. Rin stepped forward. We don't even know if it sees us. Iris's voice carried like weight. Nor if it wants to. This isn't Haldreth, Rin snapped. That place bled noise and response. This one gives nothing. That could be safety. Or silence, Arya said, before it becomes something else. Nirel spoke gently from the shadows. We do not know its rhythm. Or if it has one. Saria raised her hand. We stabilize what we can. Transfer power. No one descends. Not yet. Rin turned her face away. Later, in the lower corridors of Veltharin dusk, the light was thin and cold. Ornith stood by the viewport. Her breath fogged the inner glass. Outside, the curvature of the world could just be glimpsed, a faint suggestion behind the blur of distance and orbit. No landmarks. No motion. No invitation. She heard footsteps before she heard the voice. Thank you for coming. Rin. You know why I'm here, she said quietly. I do. Rin stepped closer, a small data crystal in her palm. I need your threads and codes. One drop vessel. No record. No broadcast. We descend. We see. Ornith stared out at the faint blur of the world. And if it sees you first? Then I'll know something, Rin said. And that's more than we have now. You're violating command. I'm answering the silence. Ornith didn't speak for a long time. Then, slowly, she took the crystal from Rin's hand. Launch prep will take 9 cycles. I'll keep the lights dim. Rin nodded once and turned to leave. At the threshold, she paused. We drifted too long, Ornith. Some of us forgot how to move. She disappeared into the corridor. Ornith looked back out into the dark. The world turned below. No shape. No call. Only the weight of waiting. Chapter 9, Fault Lines. The midday sun was dull and swollen above the horizon, veiled behind a drifting sky of pale soot. The march had slowed. The terrain sharpened into dry ridges and shallow gullies, forcing the party to move in staggered lines. By the time Grave Point came into view, rusted towers on the rise, shadows stretching long across the basin, tension walked beside them like a second shadow. Silas Kane halted at the checkpoint, flanked by Dane and Lex. The gates were open, guarded, but not hostile. Wint Malek waited at the inner wall, his stance unreadable, a rifle slung idly over his shoulder. Didn't expect to see you back so soon, Wint called down. Silas didn't answer immediately. The dust in his throat wasn't from the march. Need supplies. Refit. Shelter for a day. Wint eyed the Mechs behind them. You brought the whole war with you. Silas just nodded. Inside Grave Point, the air felt thinner. A town recovering still carried bruises, cracked facades, half-lit lamps, and the smell of scorched circuitry. But life moved. Signal rats darted between buildings with scavenged gear. Smoke curled from repair kills. Lisa and Dre disappeared quickly, muttering to a pair of mechanics near the rail bones. Lex coordinated the mech perimeter in near silence. Orianthe stayed close to the shard, her hand never leaving the sling. Its faint pulse responded to something distant, unseen, but near. Rel stood alone outside the healer's tent where the boy had once been treated. The flaps were closed now. He didn't go in. The coarse spine was quiet now. Traders had folded their stalls. Light flickered from dying braziers. Ash drifted in slow circles through the warm air. Silas waited beneath the old transit arch, boots planted wide, watching the way shadows pooled between the columns. Wynn emerged alone from the west tunnel, coat open, the dust on his sleeves catching the light. They didn't shake hands. Wint. You're leaving. Silas. I am. Wint. Could have said something sooner. Silas. You knew. That landed. Wink gave the faintest nod and stepped closer. He pulled a squat, rough bottled flask from his coat. Wint. Figured if I was wrong, I'd drink this anyway. He uncorked it, took a short swig, then offered it. Silas took the bottle. Held it for a moment. The seal was old, cracked at the edge. He drank. It was harsh and warm, burned just enough to remind him he was alive. They stood a moment, passing it back and forth without hurry. Wint. You want men. Silas. Volunteers. Only those who understand the road may not bring them back. Wint. You'll find more willing than able. This place is tired. Silas. We all are. Silence folded over them again. The kind only two men could share after surviving years on opposite sides of something they no longer name. Not enemies. Not anymore. Wint. You don't trust the city. Silas. I trust it to be what it is. Cautious. Fractured. Watching its own back. Wint. Fair. Silas looked at him. Really looked. Wint was older than when they'd first met, older even than a man his age had a right to be. Gray at the temples, but not in defeat. It was the kind of gray that came from standing through one season too many. And Silas knew he probably looked the same. Silas. You've done what you can. Gravepoint's still standing. That's more than most. Wint, quietly. For now. They passed the bottle once more. It was nearly empty now. Wint. If you succeed, whatever's in that relay wakes up clean. Don't forget who held the line while you chased it. Silas. I won't. Wint. And if you fail. Silas. Then you'll have worse things to remember. Wint almost smiled. Almost. Then, wordlessly, he reached into his coat and pulled something out. It was small, wrapped in cloth. He held it out. Silas took it, unwrapping it carefully. A flint ignition spark wheel, old, worn, but cleaned and restored. He recognized it. It used to belong to a man they'd both buried. Wint. You kept the fire going before I saw the smoke. Figured it belonged with you now. Silas looked at it for a moment, then nodded, slow and sincere. He reached into his satchel and drew out a folded scrap of thick weather map parchment, half-burned, with pressure routes and old terrain from farther west. He handed it over. Silas. Only 2 copies left. The other's in Lex's bag. Thought you might want to know how far it still goes. Wint unfolded it, eyes scanning the markings. Wint. There's still places out there? Silas. There's still choices. Wint tucked the map into his coat without another word. Wint. There's 3 waiting at the west dock. One's too young, if you ask me. Silas. I'm not asking. Wint. She's called Mara. Father was militia. Died last season. She's quiet, but steady. Eyes too old for her age. Silas, softly. Then she'll understand what we're walking into. Wint. You leave at first light? Silas. Sooner, if the wind's right. The flask was empty. Wint tossed it into the firepan beside them, where it hissed faintly and cracked. There was no farewell. Just a nod. A quiet understanding. 2 men who had once stood across from one another, now finding a kind of peace in shared burdens. Silas turned and walked toward the west dock. There, 3 figures waited in the haze. One of them was small. All of them stood steady. That evening, the party arrived in Rustbrook just past sundown. The town was still wounded, walls half repaired, lights dim, watchtowers rebuilt from salvaged wood and steel, but alive. People emerged slowly at first, cautious, then embracing the returning group. There were tears and quiet embraces, a murmur of disbelief rippling through the square as names were recognized. Silas ordered the Mechs held back, positioned behind a distant ridge outside town, out of sight. Trapper was the first to meet them. He limped forward through the dusk, weather-beaten and stiff but smiling. His handshake with Silas was firm and personal. "Took your time," he said, voice gruff with emotion. "Glad you're here, old friend." Lex clasped forearms with a mechanic he hadn't seen since the first uprising. Dre and Lisa disappeared quickly, heading toward the power grid where two overworked engineers stood knee-deep in tangle wire. They spoke fast, something about stabilizing flux relays before night. Orianthe knelt briefly to greet a child who had run up with a handful of desert lilies. She tucked one into her braid. The shard at her chest pulsed faintly. Dinner was set out under tarps strung with scavenged lighting, stew-indented pots, bread still warm from solar ovens, a half-cask of cactus wine opened in celebration. Laughter threaded through the gathering. Stories were exchanged. Names honored. Not all were present, but no one was forgotten. Miriam appeared, older but unbroken, and drew Orianthe into a long embrace. The two sat together at the edge of the gathering, heads close, speaking softly. Trapper handed Lex a tin cup of fire brew and gestured toward the horizon. "Still quiet out there," he said. But the winds changed. A group of teenagers strung wire from a Mech casing and rigged it into a makeshift instrument. One played chords from an old Resistance song while others sang off-key. No one minded. Rustbrook would hold. Later, as stars pricked through the darkening sky, the boy sat cross-legged near the fire, eyes reflecting the flame. A quiet smile played on his face, not childlike, but ancient, like someone who remembered this place not from stories, but from lifetimes ago. For a few hours, the war outside stilled. And in the heart of the wasteland, Hope sat at a shared table. Then came the alarm. The outer defenses flared. A horn cut through the comm. Raiders. They came from the east, the same direction the signal rat had warned about weeks earlier. A wave of patched armor, jury-rigged tech, and howling fury. Rustbrook's defenders scrambled. Old barricades groaned under fresh impact. Explosions ripped through the east trench. Mortars fell. Fire burst through the scrapyard wall. It looked like Rustbrook would fall. Then the ground trembled. From behind the ridge, 6 Mechs erupted into the chaos. They slammed into the fray with seismic force. One launched a shockwave that cracked the ground open, toppling raiders like leaves. Another fired twin plasma lances that carved molten arcs through enemy ranks. Lex led the charge, directing formations with neural thread precision. Silas and Dane moved like blunt instruments of retaliation, cutting through lines with ruthless momentum. Orianthe walked through fire, the shard ablaze in her hands. The raiders turned too late. Their formation broke. The first Mech tore a crawler in half. 2 more ignited enemy bunkers in brilliant blue arcs. One raider screamed, "It's them!" from the relay. And panic followed like a wave. A roar split the smoke. From the wreckage of a crawler, a towering figure emerged, broad-shouldered, wrapped in scavenged armor, his face half covered by a cracked rebreather. One eye glowed dim red, mechanical, sunken into scar tissue. Cress, a man marked by a single steel eye and 100 old scars. Silas spotted him instantly. Their eyes locked. The man spat onto the ground. "Kane." Silas stepped forward, casting aside his rifle. "Let's finish this." They met between burning wrecks, dust and sparks swirling around them. No one else intervened. Not Lex, not the Mechs, not even the fleeing raiders. It was silent but for the grind of metal, the rasp of breath. Cress swung first, wide, brutal. Silas ducked, drove a knee into his gut, then slammed his elbow into the steel eye. Sparks flew, but Cress barely flinched. He headbutted Silas, splitting the skin above his brow. Silas reeled back, blood dripping into one eye. The axe came again, Silas blocked it with a snapped steel beam, the impact jarring his entire arm. He rolled, came up with a jagged crowbar, and struck low. Cress screamed as the metal caught his leg. But he didn't fall. They circled, panting. Broken machinery lay scattered around them. Silas grabbed a loosened servo pipe. Cress caught it with the axe and twisted it free, sending Silas stumbling. "Rustbrook dies with you," Cress growled. Silas grinned, blood in his teeth. "I've heard worse threats from better men." The next clash was feral. Hands, fists, knees, tools turned into weapons. Silas ducked under a swing and drove a jagged rebar shard into Cress's side. The man bellowed, grabbing Silas by the throat and lifting him. The cybernetic eye pulsed bright. "I should crush you." Silas, choking, drove his knee upward, once, twice, until the grip loosened. He dropped, rolled, and seized the shard axe. "I've had worse days," Silas muttered, and swung. The axe met flesh. Cress's eyes sparked wildly, flickered, and went dark. He collapsed in the dust. Silent. Silas stood over him, panting, bloodied. Around him, the last of the raiders were scattering into the dunes. The Mechs stood like sentinels over Rustbrook. Lex gave a distant nod. Orianthe lowered her hand from the shard. It was done. By dawn, the fires had been put out. Smoke still clung to the east wall, curling in slow eddies above craters and scorched sand. The bodies had been cleared. Tools clanged. Burned-out drones and shattered tech were dragged into piles for salvage or burial. A few civilians sat in silence beside makeshift memorials, names already being carved into plates of old hull metal. Trapper stood beside a shattered barricade, leaning heavily on his cane. "Could have lost everything," he muttered. Silas nodded, watching Lex direct mech recovery with quiet efficiency. One unit had lost both legs and was now being lifted by cranes made from scrapyard remnants. Orianthe walked slowly through the square, still clutching the shard, now wrapped in cloth. Children stared at her as she passed, eyes wide, not in fear, but awe. Miriam handed her a water flask. "You saved us." "We delayed them," Orianthe answered softly. "They'll be back." Nearby, Rel knelt by a smoldering turret mount, reprogramming its remaining core. He didn't speak, but his hands were steady. Lex approached Silas. "Repairs will take time." They hit harder than they should have. "They were desperate," Silas said. "Or someone ordered them to be." Lex looked east. "We both know who." Silas exhaled. "Then we can't wait any longer." In White City, the air inside the command chamber was cold, clinical. Kalen Thorne stood beneath the high-grid display of active fronts. The Relay Teen was moving too fast. The vault remained dormant, but only barely. Thorne's voice was flat. "We need a buffer. That outpost near Sector 10 used to be a relay node before Faction X overran it." Selrook tensed. "You want to take it back?" "I want to secure our flank." Avel 9 stepped forward. "Requisitioning Guardian units. Target, Outpost Vex. Tactical priority, high. Engagement level, full." Sel turned away. He didn't argue further. Outpost Vex, once a mining relay, now a Faction X stronghold, lay carved into the jagged throat of a cliffside ravine. The place was a scar. Half-ruined scaffolds jutted from the stone. Rebar walls laced with scrap metal and barbed mesh formed a crude perimeter. Watchtowers smoldered from burned barrels. Defensive drones hovered like angry wasps, jury-rigged and glitchy. Gun nests manned by masked fighters lined the edges, most barely older than 16. And above them, the sky screamed. The assault came just before dusk. White City's guardians descended in formation, black thunder cracking the clouds. Choppers swept in low over the cliff, turbine rotors pounding like war drums. Reaper cannons locked into forward position. Missile pods blinked red. Then came the fire. Plasma rounds tore through the first barricade. Pulse shells struck the outer towers, blowing bodies and steel into ash. An auto turret spun and screamed for 2 seconds before a beam lance melted it in half. Faction X responded fast. Raiders scrambled from dugouts and tunnel mouths, flinging mines, spitting fire from hacked drone mounts. One Guardian was hit mid-air with a fusion-tipped spear. It spun out, clipped a rock face, and exploded in a burst of white heat that set half the lower slope on fire. The ravine turned into a war chamber. A Reaper gun whined as it tore through a Raider formation near the comm spire. Their cover disintegrated into slag. A second Guardian hit the ground hard, kinetic boots pulsing. It charged the south gate, blade extended, a gleaming mono-edge whipsword. A Raider leapt at it with a burning chain axe. The two collided in mid-sprint. Steel shrieked. Sparks. A second's silence. Then the Raider's upper torso hit the ground first. A Faction X champion, massive, wrapped in synth armor and wielding twin shock batons, engaged two Guardians in the main courtyard. He moved like a brawler from the old world, using debris as cover. One Guardian got too close, the champion slammed him into a wall, then crushed the optic unit with a downstrike. The Guardian twitched once, then fell still. The other responded with a shoulder cannon at point-blank range. The blast left nothing but armor fragments. Above, two White City choppers laid suppressing fire on the upper cliffs. A third was struck by a chain flechette launcher, homemade but deadly. Its rotors buckled. The pilot tried to lift, but the machine careened into the barracks, exploding on impact and taking half the structure with it. Aval 9 landed next, not dropped, but walked in, precise and unstoppable. Gold optic beams sliced through smoke and rubble. Its arms split open into tri-barrel configurations. Every third step came with the report of a rail-fired shot. One Raider tried to rush it with a spike hammer. Aval 9 caught him mid-air and crushed him against the wall like a nail. Near the inner gate, a Faction X sniper with a glint rifle got 3 kills before anyone noticed. One Guardian fell from a ledge, another dropped mid-dash. But then a drone, a White City Wasp-class interceptor, found the source. It zipped into the outcrop and exploded on contact. The entire platform caved in, taking the sniper's post with it. Inside the tunnels, close-quarters fighting broke out. Mechs couldn't fit. It was blade and burst fire, torch and boot. One Guardian was pulled into the dark by 2 Raiders. No one ever saw him again. Another stormed through with a flamethrower and left the passage clean. On the eastern bluff, a tricore missile struck the rock face, detonating with a roar that sent a landslide down into the forward staging area. Faction X had booby-trapped the cliffs. One Guardian was caught beneath the avalanche, its frame crushed beneath a slab of mining steel. Another fought free, armor hissing, blade glowing red from heat. A squad of White City shock troops breached the upper platform, where a makeshift command node had been set up. There, a Faction X warlord stood with a serrated machete and a chainsling. He moved with brutal grace. One trooper went down with his throat cut. Another's knee shattered under a chain strike. The last Guardian in the squad activated a pulse barrier and closed the distance. Machete met gravax. Blood. Sparks. Steel on steel. The Guardian stumbled back with a gash through the left pauldron. The warlord prepared the kill stroke. But Aval 9 arrived first. Its kinetic hammer fell once. The cliff cracked. The warlord was gone. By nightfall, the battle had become an echo chamber of collapse and ruin. Fires danced across the compound. Turrets stood silent. The ravine had become a crater of black glass, scorched walls, and bodies. Aval 9 stood alone in the main courtyard. Its armor was pitted and scorched. One optic lens was cracked. All missiles spent. It opened a comm channel to White City Command. Status: perimeter secured. Hostile force neutralized. Casualties: significant. Resistance: escalating. Far away, in the command tower, Thorne read the transmission. He didn't blink. "Move up the timetable," he said. The camp was still. No speeches. No last-minute drills. Just the slow breathing of resting machines and the low crackle of watchfires burning in half-dug pits. The Mechs stood silent, their limbs powered down but not forgotten, dark hulks looming against the stars. The wind whispered across the ridge like a warning. In his tent near the edge of camp, Silas Kane sat alone. Sleep had come and gone. He hadn't eaten. He'd cleaned his rifle. Sharpened his blade. Checked the mission pack. Then checked it again. But nothing calmed the static beneath his skin. He wasn't afraid of the battle. He was afraid of everything after. The flap stirred. Orianthe entered without a word. She wore her undersuit, armor stripped to its core layers. Her boots were dusted from walking the perimeter. Her braid was coming undone, a strand clinging to the edge of her jaw. She didn't look at him at first, just crouched near the heat panel, lit by the low flicker of tent light. Silas. Couldn't sleep? Orianthe. Didn't try. He poured her a half cup of water from the ration flask. She took it. Held it. Didn't drink. They sat in quiet. Orianthe, after a while. You remember Morrow's Divide? He nodded, a faint twitch of memory behind his eyes. Silas. The gorge that collapsed under us? Orianthe. You told me to run. Stayed behind to set the charges. Silas. You came back anyway. Orianthe. You weren't allowed to die yet. Silas, dry. You almost shot me for disobeying orders. Orianthe. I almost shot you for being right. A beat passed. She almost smiled. Silas. You were colder then. Orianthe. You were angrier. They didn't speak for a while. The silence wasn't heavy. It was close. The kind that only came from people who'd survived something unspoken. Outside, metal groaned, someone adjusting a mech frame. A blade scraped a whetstone in rhythm. One of the guards coughed near the south fire pit. Inside, it was just them. He looked at her, really looked, and tried to reconcile what she was now with the version he remembered from so long ago. The soldier. The captor. The woman who made no promises and gave no apologies. She had changed. But not all at once. Power didn't just shift her. It had revealed her. Orianthe, quietly. You've become a leader of men. Silas, bitter smile. You have no idea how scared I am. She didn't laugh. But her eyes softened, just slightly. Orianthe. Good. Fear keeps us honest. Silas let out a slow breath, as if he'd been holding it for years. Silas. Are you happy now? She didn't answer. Silas. I mean, more than then? Still silence. But this one was heavier. More personal. Silas. Because, you know. If things had been different. Her hand brushed his wrist. Gentle. Intentional. Not as a command, but as a boundary. A moment that said enough, but not with cruelty. Then she lay down beside him. Not intimately. Not distantly either. Just there, like she had no strength left to hide the version of herself that still needed someone. Her breathing was steady but not slow. She didn't curl into him, but didn't stop him when he shifted closer. Orianthe. I will choose, when I have the opportunity to choose. The words were more than they sounded. A vow. A defiance against everything she'd been shaped into. Every command she'd followed. Every destiny others had placed upon her shoulders. And somehow, Silas understood. He turned to face her. The tent seemed impossibly quiet. Silas. Just, in case. And he kissed her. Not forceful. Not dramatic. A whisper of touch, long suppressed. A moment stretched between memory and possibility. Her lips didn't resist. For a second, just 1 second, her eyes glowed. A soft pulse beneath the skin, not violent or mechanical. Just a shimmer. A breath of starlight. The shard across her chest echoed the beat, one slow pulse, then silence. Silas pulled back, unsure. But she didn't move. Didn't recoil. And in that space between hesitation and choice, he saw her. Not the commander. Not the conduit. Not the myth. Just the woman. And more than that, the girl she used to be. The one who never got to be just Orianthe. Who never got to feel safe without earning it in blood. She turned toward him then. Not in hunger. Not in fear. Just closeness. She curled gently beside him, her head resting beneath his shoulder, a hand settling lightly on his chest. Her fingers barely moved, just enough to feel that he was real. That he was staying. And in that moment, she wasn't the shard bearer. She wasn't the voice of the relay. She was a girl who needed to be held. And Silas, who had always thought it impossible, finally let himself hold her. All the grief he'd buried. The longing he'd swallowed. The softness he'd killed to survive, it surfaced, slow and quiet, in the way his arms wrapped around her. Careful. Protective. As if to say, I'm here. You're safe. Just tonight. She said nothing. But a tremor ran through her shoulders. A breath caught halfway. And her fingers, barely perceptible, curled tighter. Orianthe, barely audible. If I lose you. She didn't finish. Just pressed closer, her forehead tucked into the hollow of his neck. Silas. You won't. Not tonight. Time passed like a slow tide. Outside, the wasteland turned colder. Somewhere, a blade was sheathed. Boots shifted. Voices dimmed. Inside the tent, two people who had been enemies, allies, and symbols for too long found the one version of themselves that war had never managed to kill. Still unfinished. Still here. Together, in the only hour they had left. They didn't expect to see anything, only sand, ruin, and wind. But as they crested the final ridge above the ash-stained basin, a stark silhouette emerged, towers, barricades, sensor pylons. A fortified structure squatted where only ruin should have been. Silas froze. That's Faction X, he muttered, voice like gravel. But it's not. Orianthe stepped beside him, eyes narrowing. They rebuilt it. White City claimed the site. Below, fresh steel glinted where the old torture cages once rusted. Domed turrets scanned the basin with mechanical precision. Sentry drones, sleek, chrome-plated, paced wall-top rails, their forms angular and inhuman. Along the barricades, soldiers braced behind mounted cannons and shoulder-slung Reaper guns, their matte barrels cold and hungry. Each weapon bore the crest of White City, stylized obsidian wings folded over a hexagon. Lex whispered, "This is an outpost. A military node. They've moved fast." "They're not expecting us," Silas said. "That's to our advantage." But the moment shattered with a piercing whine, targeting systems locking on. A flare streaked skyward. "Too late," Rel growled. The hillside exploded. White City's defenses opened with terrifying precision. Forward barricades discharged sweeping arcs of pulse fire. Autodrones, spherical, shielded, darting, swarmed from recessed bays, blanketing the sky in scanner static. Mounted Reaper guns barked stuttering bursts of high-velocity plasma. These weren't handheld rifles, they were integrated war platforms. Silas dove behind a dune, shouting orders. "Dane, flank left. Mechs, deploy and suppress. Keep the heavy plasma back until we punch a hole." His team scattered. Their weapons were cobbled together, old machine rifles, salvaged pre-fall pistols, jury-rigged plasma casters. Ammo had to count. Gear had history, each scratch earned in survival. No polish. No uniform. Just grit. Silas vaulted a broken pillar and dropped low, firing a tight burst, 3 rounds, 1 kill. His rifle clicked dry. A White City rifleman charged, blade in hand, expecting hesitation. He didn't get it. Silas lunged, slammed his shoulder into the man's gut, wrestled the blade away, and drove it under the chin. Blood fanned the dust. No time to think. He was already moving. Rel scrambled up the ridge, plasma grenades glowing in each hand. He lobbed two, and the first turret collapsed in a bloom of white fire. A sentry drone dropped from its track and landed 10 meters from Orianthe. Its gaunt limbs unfolded like blades. She stepped back, hand raised, the shard pulsed. The interference staggered it just long enough for Dane to unload 3 bursts into its side. Metal screeched. Sparks flew. The drone dropped twitching. Another orb drone dropped behind her. Orianthe spun, the shard still pulsing, and brought her elbow hard against its sensor core. It flinched, just enough for her to jam the shard itself into its neck joint and rip downward. Sparks exploded. The relic had never been used like that. And yet, it pulsed brighter. As if pleased. From the ridge, Lex summoned the Mechs. On my mark, converge and focus on turret nests. Rel, guide the forward arc. The ground trembled. 6 Mechs crested the ridge, weapons online. Their plating was scarred, their optics scorched from rustbrook, but they moved with intent. Twin-mounted plasma cannons spun up, spitting arcs of violet heat. Each shot lit up the basin, ripping through metal and sand. Silas ran between cover points. His machine rifle, a patchwork of rust and steel, barked caseless rounds in short, brutal bursts. No auto-targeting. Just muscle memory. Grit. Focus. Breath. White City soldiers countered with near-perfect cohesion. Sonic rifles split the air with ripple bursts that made blood vessels hum. Fragment drones detonated mid-air, spraying shrapnel in all directions. Reaper guns tracked motion with surgical lethality, headshots, joint bursts, body slams. Suppress their flanks. Lex shouted. They're deploying side splitters, don't cluster. Rel ducked under a flanking drone, pulled a rusted side blade from his belt, and stabbed upward into its core. It sparked and collapsed in his arms. Still works, he grinned, tossing the hissing wreck aside. One of the smaller scout drones leapt from the side barricade and tackled Dane, sending both into the dirt. The thing was wiry, fast, blade-armed. Dane grunted, locked one arm around its torso and the other under its throat actuator. With a sound like snapping rebar, he crushed it to scrap. Get off me, he muttered, rising with smoke curling from his sleeves. Then came the shriek of engines. 3 sleek black choppers cut across the horizon, White City's aerial elite. Their profiles shimmered with active cloaking, broken only by the blaze of missile flares. Mark I chopper, twin-engine scout gunship. Fast response. Armed with railburst pods and sonic disruptors. Nimble. Deadly. Mark II chopper, armored predator. Cloak silhouette. Equipped with vortex missiles, shield destabilizers, and reactive countermeasures. Designed for anti-mech warfare. From inside the lead Mark II, Commander Havith Kai keyed comms. Engage and break their advance. Prioritize Mech class signatures. AI response, lock confirmed. Override protocol available. Shall I proceed? Do it, Kai said calmly. Make them fear the sky. Eyes up. Silas yelled. Cover the Mechs. The Mark I swept low, unleashing a blossom of micromissiles. One Mech reeled as its shoulder actuator exploded. Lex rerouted fire control before the whole thing collapsed. Twin plasma bolts roared upward from rear positions. The second chopper lit like a torch, spinning into the ridge and detonating with a brutal shockwave. The concussion knocked Orianthe off her feet. Rel dragged her back behind a broken barrier, covering her with his body. A heartbeat of silence followed. Dust floated in still air. The battlefield paused, no gunfire, no turbines, just breath and static. A bird passed overhead, oblivious. Time hung suspended. Then, a fresh volley screamed down like judgment. The final chopper dove low, aiming for Lex's command line. Dane, amid chaos, launched a salvaged missile into its forward intake. Inside the cockpit, Kai saw the lock-on flicker red. He exhaled. So it ends. The sky bloomed with fire. The tide turned. Silas fired a final plasma bolt through the last sensor array. The turret sparked. Drones flickered, went limp. Sentries collapsed mid-run. Smoke curled across the basin. Bodies lay still. They had won. Aftermath. By nightfall, the outpost was in their hands. Fires hissed in the dark. Heat clung to the stones. No one trusted the quiet, not anymore. Orianthe stood alone where the old stockade had been. Beneath her, the scorched ground remained unbroken. This place should have stayed buried, she whispered. Silas stepped beside her, blood drying down his arm. White City doesn't bury things. They build over them. Rel pried a chip from a fallen drone's skull plate. Encrypted. But not unreadable. Lex, inside the command post, brushed ash from a half-built array. This wasn't just a fort. They were building uplinks. Relay ties. This was meant to grow. Silas looked east, eyes hard. Then we cut it off before it spreads. The Mechs stood guard in the gloom, silent, wounded sentinels. Beyond the ridge, the horizon shimmered. Heat. Smoke. Signal haze. They were heading to White City. But high above, in the cold black void, something stirred. The sky had not turned. Not yet. But it would. And when it did, they would not be alone. The sun hung low over the wastes, its light dimmed by rising dust and distant smoke. Along the broken ridge where the wasteland met the edge of White City's reach, the ground had become a killing field in waiting. Silas Kane stood at the front of his formation, 33 fighters, 6 Mechs, 2 engineers, and 1 girl cradling a shard that no longer whispered, but pulsed like a heart ready to break open. On the far plateau, White City had deployed everything. 3 Reaper gun platforms locked into the rocky spine of the hill. A squadron of Blackbird choppers hovered just outside direct firing range, their engines ticking in rhythmic menace. A rank of armored guardians stood shoulder to shoulder, Aval 9 in their center, gold optics gleaming. Behind them, the vault doors remained sealed, but faint vibrations trembled in the sand like a giant asleep. Silas lowered his scope. The silence between them was unbearable. Not just anticipation, dread. The kind that settles into your marrow. Lex stood behind him, hand hovering over the mech command pad. Dane checked his sidearm again. Orianthe stood to his right, the shard across her chest shimmering with restrained energy. Her expression unreadable. Controlled. But her fingers twitched, just once. Behind her, Lyra stirred. The girl, if she could still be called that, rose from the metal cradle the engineers had fashioned during the night march. It groaned as she left it, as though it too understood something sacred had ended. She moved like waking stone, graceful, heavy, inevitable. Her bare feet touched the grit without a sound, though dust curled faintly around her steps. She wore only a linen tunic, pale and sleeveless, and beneath it her skin shimmered faintly with a buried glow, like the embers of a long-dead star remembering its name. 2 White City guardians flanked her. Reaper armor. Full-body chrome plating. Visors blacked out. Still as statues. But not calm. Not anymore. One of them flexed a gauntlet. The other tracked her with subtle dread, hand resting near the safety of a charged rifle. Lyra didn't see them. Or didn't care. Her eyes were wrong, too deep, too ancient. They didn't reflect the world. They looked through it, as if seeing something behind the sky. The earth around her darkened, not visually, but viscerally. The kind of dimming that lived in bones and blood. The wind pulled away from her, curling elsewhere, as if unwilling to touch her. Behind the front line, Lisa stumbled 1 step back, murmuring a half-prayer. Across the basin stood Silas Kane, his jaw clenched, hand resting near his belt but not yet drawn. Silas, everyone ready? Lex gave a sharp nod, adjusting the power core of his plasma rifle. Aval 9 stood behind them, idle but watching. Orianthe didn't respond. Her gaze wasn't on Lyra. It was on the sky. Lyra kept walking, slow and silent, until she reached the basin's edge. There she stopped, head tilted slightly, like listening for something only she could hear. Then Thorn's voice broke across the open band, calm, calculated, but with a brittle edge. Thorn, overcome your outgunned, Kane. Stand down. This isn't your war. Silas, even it is now. Aval 9's chest unit lit with gold. Combat protocols initialized. Lex's voice followed. Lex, Reapers are charging. Sink in 3. Orianthe, anchors unstable. A hit here might fracture the whole field. Silas, we don't move. We don't fire. Unless I say. The world held its breath. Wind sharpened, curling in unnatural directions. Static collected in every weapon barrel, every strand of hair, every nerve. White City's turrets locked. The Reapers along the ridge clicked into position. Aval braced. Silas's group lowered stance. The Guardians beside Lyra flinched as her glow brightened. And then... a sound. Not thunder. Not engines. Not human. A deep harmonic rumble, like the groaning exhale of the void itself. It didn't roll across the sky. It broke it. Above them, the clouds peeled apart, clean, silent, reverent. No wind. No light show. Just absence. A wound in the firmament. And from that wound, something descended. Not a ship. Not exactly. A structure. A presence. A memory shaped like a vessel. Geometry twisted into symmetry. Vast, dark wings folded along the belly of a shape that shimmered between matter and thought. A column of white gold light speared from it, slow, sovereign, terrifying in its purity. It didn't blind. It clarified. The world around it became too clear. One of Lyra's guardians dropped to his knees with a thud. The other took a step back, visibly shaken. Lyra stepped forward, unblinking, into the very edge of the light. Not reaching. Not reacting. Answering. Orianthe, barely a whisper, they've come back. No one asked who. They already knew. Lights. Not flares. Not satellites. Ships. Starships. Massive. Silent. Triangular holes like daggers of starlight. They didn't roar, they arrived. As if they'd always been there, waiting for the right moment to descend. Their skin shimmered with impossible colors, not painted, but remembered. The wasteland held its breath. On both sides of the field, weapons froze. Fingers slipped off triggers. One of the ships rotated midair, revealing glyphs across its underhull, impossible patterns etched into the metal like memory. Another ship shifted formation beside it. Then another. 7 total. A voice rang out, not over radio, but inside them. We return not for conquest. We return for what was once ours. Silas took one step back. The hair on his arms stood up. Orianthe, whispering. The seers. Lex lowered his weapon. Lex? You're telling me those are? Orianthe. Yes. Across the field, Thorn stared skyward, jaw clenched. He had prepared for every threat. But not this. Not gods returning to claim the battlefield. The Guardians turned their heads in eerie unison. One stepped forward, then halted, as if awaiting command from something unseen. Aval 9's optics recalibrated. Scanning. Searching. Processing. Aval 9. Designation unknown. Energy signatures, origin linked to relay and vault network. Priority change recommended. Silas looked to the horizon. Then to Orianthe. Then to Lyra, who stood perfectly still, her glow now answering the pulse above. A harmonic thread, almost inaudible, wove between her and the ships above. The war they'd all prepared for just collapsed under the weight of something older. Not peace. Not unity. A reckoning. The sky had broken. And nothing, no plan, no weapon, no command, would ever be enough again. Lyra tilted her head and spoke a single word, barely above a breath. Lyra. Remember. And above, the ships began to descend. To be continued in Part 5 of The Wasteland.